Hello, welcome back to my fave fanfics. Here, I post, well, my favorite fanfictions, if that wasn't obvious. I do hope you'll enjoy them as much as I do. Please like and subscribe for more content. Without further ado, let's get started.
Welcome, my dear faves, to the 6th part of What If Minato Yeeted Himself and His Son into the World of Demon Slayer. Credit goes to SapavemLasae. Chapter 21. Truth and Consequences. Minato can't help but smile when he looks at the two. It's their first meeting, but Naruto's bright smile draws Gaara in. The boy is bubbly and happy to meet a new kid, especially one his age, as he asks Gaara to be his friend. Gaara looks unsure. His eyes dart to Tanjiro with an edge of fear, and then he turns back to Naruto as the boy grips his hands. Brilliant blue eyes peer at Gaara, staring into his very soul. He had told Minato on a whim that morning that he wanted to meet Naruto. Now he wasn't sure if he should have waited longer or not. It had been several weeks since Minato had last seen the boy, conversing mostly with Tanjiro through crows and the occasional visit where Minato dropped by between patrols. "You have cool hair, Gaara," Naruto says with a laugh, his eyes watching the red locks. Minato knows that Naruto hasn't spent a single morning without talking to the picture of his mother that he was given. He tells her about his day and what he's going to be doing, running his hands over her image as he talks to her. Sometimes the other kids join him. He was infatuated with Kushina's hair. It went without saying that he would love Gaara's too. It was hard not to when it was the perfect shade. It also helped that Naruto would befriend a rock if he could, through stubborn will alone. Minato's smile softens as Gaara nods quietly, his eyes widening further when Naruto reached out and hugged him tightly. His eyes were almost frantic, and Minato was about to tell Naruto to back off when Gaara carefully circled his arms around the boy and hugged him back. Gaara's eyes watered and he hid his face in Naruto's shoulder. Naruto's chakra pulsed and surrounded the two as he registered that Gaara probably wasn't all right, but he didn't let the boy go. Tanjiro came to stand next to Minato as Gaara mumbled into Naruto's ear. The boy spoke back in a hushed whisper, distracting his new friend and stopping the tears that were forming. "Gaara seems to like your son," Tanjiro voices calmly. His eyes are observing the two carefully, but Minato can see how relaxed the man is as Gaara tugs Naruto to the house, intending to grab Tanjiro to introduce the two. Naruto lets him, trailing behind happily as he talks about the other kids that could also be Gaara's friends. A smile is present on Gaara's face. It's soft and small, and Minato can tell that the boy is still in shock over how easily he's been accepted, but Gaara hides it masterfully. "I'm glad. I intended to have the two meet before, but things always got in the way. They are the same in a way. Gaara's birth father just screwed up horrendously," Minato murmurs, his eyes darkening at the mention of Raza. Tanjiro glances at him and then back at Gaara. Gaara can choose his family now. "Wherever he wants to go, we'll be there for him," the man voices. "So, you've adopted him then?" Minato asks with a slight chuckle. He can understand the feeling. Tanjiro nods. "He wants to stay with us, so yes. Still, you stated he will need to train, and I agree that for his safety he should learn to control his abilities. That will be difficult if we remain here." His eyes shift over to the house where Tanjiro is giggling between the two boys. His eyes are the same shade as his father's, his hair just as dark but still brilliant. He's a cute kid full of laughter and kindness. Minato can feel the haze of energy around him that reminds him of Naruto. Kai stands next to the boys, calmly asking them if they would want something to warm themselves up. Gaara tells Naruto about a nice cider that Kai makes, and immediately the boy is on board. Naruto looks back at Minato to make sure, but Minato nods. He trusts the Kamados. Maybe it's because Kurama can't sense anything malicious from them, maybe it's because Tanjiro saw a child in need of help and acted instead of leaving him be, and maybe it's because Minato understands Tanjiro and Kai and how caring they truly are. Kai had told Minato about Gaara's first episode. The first time where Gaara was so unsure and scared and he had lashed out. He had nearly hurt Tanjiro, but the man had calmly approached him and brought him into a hug. It was enough, and since then Gaara hadn't wanted to leave. I could always come back here in a flash using my abilities, but yes, it would be easier if you were closer to where the demon slayers are situated. Minato agrees. Tanjiro hums and steps next to the blonde-haired man. He watched the doors as they slide shut, leaving the two adults in the snow. I know of the demon slayers, from my mother, but I never thought I'd run into one, Tanjiro tells the man, glancing at Minato. Minato meets his gaze and nods. I understand the feeling. A few months ago, I didn't know demons existed. Now, it feels like ages ago. The two let the words hang between them. Tanjiro hadn't been surprised by the revelation of demon slayers when they had talked last, so Minato had figured he had some history with them. How much history was not disclosed, but they would get there. One step at a time. Minato wanted Naruto and Gaara to get used to each other first and provide the full scope of the situation to Tanjiro in the meantime. This also included Kai, but the woman was content to just let things play out as needed. The Kamados just had to choose what they wanted. Minato, if we did go with you, then my family would have protection, correct? Tanjiro asks softly. Minato looks at the man, observing him. There is an edge to his words and his shoulders. He's hiding something, but he's also careful about what he reveals. Shinjiro offered his estate, so yes, you would have his protection and the protection of the Demon Slayer Corps. Sakanji has also offered his home, which would offer the same measures. Minato calmly replies. Tanjiro nods. He debates with something, holding his back straight and his hands tucked into the sleeves of his haori. He takes a deep breath, but when he breathes out, Minato notices a shift. His breathing is stronger. It's firm and it empowers his whole being as Tanjiro holds himself straighter. Total concentration, or at the very least a derivation of it. He looks over at Minato and gives him a soft smile. I would like to go where my family will be safe. Truthfully, there is a rich history with my family and demons, but the only parts that I know are what my mother taught to me before she passed away. That was recently, and the circumstances were unique. There is a good reason why my family remains on this mountain and not out in the open. Tanjiro takes a step back to the house, gesturing for Minato to follow. He does, the shinobi matching the pace set as they approach the small home. They enter, removing their shoes as the cold air is washed away by the fire in the hearth. Naruto and Gaara are drinking from cups while Tanjiro sits in his brother's lap. He's nodding off, leaning against Gaara's chest tiredly. Naruto trails off as Tanjiro's eyes fall shut, his eyes observing the boy in wonder. There's a different warmth other than the fire. Minato doesn't notice it until Tanjiro crouches by the boys. The warmth from chakra, natural and untethered, gathers around them. Minato hadn't seen it before, but now it's more than apparent with Naruto's let loose. It's heavy, but more like the way that blankets piled on you are heavy than anything oppressive. It's comforting, and Minato swallows a lump in his throat. Naruto looks over at him, blue eyes gleaming happily as he reaches out. Minato walks over and leans down as Naruto tugs at his hand. "To-san, Gaara has the same chakra as me," he says in a childish whisper. It's as loud as his normal volume and everyone hears it. Minato glances at Gaara and meets his gaze. He thinks about the conversation that he had with the boy and the way that Shukaku had begrudgingly agreed to a truce. He thinks about how the Kyuubi and Shukaku wrestled and argued. He looks back at Naruto. His son is observing Gaara again, his eyes gleaming with hope and fondness already. Naruto has latched onto another one, but Minato feels like this time the bond he shares with Gaara is going to be much different. He feels like this time, this bond is going to be stronger than any other that Naruto could form. The reason why? Because Jinchuriki understood one another. Naruto was given the best life that Kushina and Minato could manage, but he still had to deal with heated glares and worried glances. He was young, but Minato remembered the first time Naruto had asked his father why he was different from other kids. Naruto didn't know what he contained, but that would have to change. He would find out eventually, and it was better that he learned from someone he trusted instead of in a life or death situation where the Kyuubi was pressing at his binds. Then again, Minato wasn't sure if the Kyuubi half inside of Naruto was trying to escape. He was mostly silent and cut off from the half inside of Minato, lending to the fact that Minato had no idea how a meeting would turn out. Gaara looks at Minato. He's wondering about the same thing as Minato, though mostly in terms of if Naruto knows what he is. Minato takes a deep breath. Today, when they return to the estate, he will tell Naruto. Let the boy see that a Jinchuriki isn't something that needs to be feared. Let him see that Jinchuriki are people too, children, and that they can be loved and cared for like anyone else. Naruto grins at Gaara and leans over to whisper to him, this time mindful of his tone because of the sleeping toddler. Tanjiro rises to go talk to Kai and Minato joins them. The woman is quietly humming to herself as she cooks, but she pauses when they enter. She reaches for her husband and he circles her in his arms, hugging her close and murmuring in her ear. He tells her about Minato's proposal and she turns her gaze to him. How soon could we get there? She asks. Minato smiles at her. Her and Tanjiro's interactions both bring him joy and make him feel sad. Today, if you wanted, I could teleport you all to the estate after sealing your things. Whenever you are ready, I can get you there. It wouldn't cause any problems for your pregnancy either, though you may feel a little sick afterward. Minato tells her. She nods and looks over at the boys. Would tomorrow morning work? She asks. You could stay the night, I'm sure Gaara and Tanjiro would like the company. She murmurs and something twinkles in her eyes. It's a similar glint to whenever Kushina got a bright idea and Minato isn't sure if he likes it. She's kind though, gentle and with no ill intentions. No, something about her tells him she's up to something, but Minato doesn't know what. Tanjiro smiles fondly at his wife, his eyes showcasing just how much he adores her. Minato feels that ache in his chest, but he lets it go with a gentle smile. He doesn't want to get jealous, but he misses Kushina all the more when he sees how much Tanjiro loves Kai. He feels it too with Ruka and Shinjiro, but it's easier when he's surrounded by the rest of the kids. He doesn't have them though. He has Naruto, but his son is making a new friend and Minato doesn't want to interfere. Hiroko is off with Jigoro training for the final selection, which is just over a month away. Kyojuro is with his father, and Sabito and Giyu are learning with Makomo and Sakanji. Minato bites back the nauseous feeling in his chest and decides to deal with it later. He lets out a calming breath and nods. Thank you, that will work, Minato tells them. It also gives him time to warn Ruka about their arrival so she can prepare. She's been restless lately after hearing about the Kamados, and she has almost been more insistent than Shinjiro to get them to come, if only to meet them. Her eyes were gleaming this morning when Minato told her he was taking Naruto to meet Gaara. She had smiled and had hinted at him to ask the Kamados about coming to the estate again, but the way she had said it sounded more like an order than a suggestion. Well, I'll go prepare a room for you then. Tanjiro dear, could you finish the food for me? She asks, and when Tanjiro nods she inclines her head to Minato and heads to inform the boys. Tanjiro gestures for Minato to join him as he walks over to the rice that Kai had been washing prior. He begins preparing the food and Minato joins, not wanting to stand awkwardly to the side. Tanjiro lets them settle into silence again. He's good about letting Minato gather himself, and after how many times he has done it, Minato suspects that the man is fully aware of what he is doing. "You take care of Naruto well." Tanjiro finally speaks as he finished with the rice and hands Minato the dishes. Minato grabs the wash bin that Kai had filled prior and sets the dishes inside to wash them. "I hope I do," Minato offers, his mind still reeling but most of his thoughts gathered. The bitter pang in his chest has settled into something much more gentle now, soothed by the calming aura in the home. Tanjiro glances at him. His eyes settle on the unsure light in Minato's eyes. "You are doing well. I can tell how happy Naruto is. He looks up to you," Tanjiro comments. Minato chuckles, the sound coming out with a tinge of bitterness that he didn't expect. His eyes shift behind him to look at his son. He's pressed completely against Gaara's side, but the red-haired boy doesn't seem to mind even if he still looks surprised. Naruto is showing Gaara how he can stick chopsticks to his face. Minato says nothing. He's voiced to Shinjiro and Sakanji how inadequate he feels as a parent, but he's only known Tanjiro for a week when he's known the other Hashira for a few months now. He thinks of Kushina and her smile and how Naruto looks so much like his mother and acts like her. The many months between him and the last time he cried over his wife feel like a lifetime, but the emotions are still present if buried under the surface. "You love your wife dearly. Sometimes enough that it hurts," Tanjiro voices. Minato looks over at him in shock. Tanjiro is watching him carefully, his eyes gentle. "I can tell that you want to do right by her and Naruto, even if it means you don't do the best for yourself." Tanjiro looks back at Naruto, and this time the boy turned to them. His chakra reaches out to Minato in worry. He can sense his father's growing sadness. Minato doesn't reply again, but this time it's because he's afraid that if he does, he'll be right back where he was all those months ago, in a house he had barely claimed for his own, only a few hours away from the event that changed his time in this dimension completely. Minato can see Kushina all around him again. The pain is easier to bear, but it's not gone. It probably never will be. Minato sees it every time Tanjiro smiles at Kai or Ruka kisses her husband. He sees it in Naruto's smiles and laughter, and sees it in Hattori's mischievous comments and actions, and he sees it in Jigero's stubborn will and Sakanji's firm resolve. He lets out a shaky breath, then another. He doesn't know Tanjiro well, but he does know the type of man he is. It's not hard when the man radiates warmth and his chakra is so potent that it floods his home. He's not classically strong, at least not in the way a shinobi is, but Tanjiro is strong in spirit and his kindness. Minato takes another shaky breath and lets out a gentle laugh, allowing the bundle of emotions to unwind slowly in his chest. He lets the hurt, the bitterness, the ache that has been present for so long dissipate. He watches his son shift in his seat, but the boy stills when Tanjiro reaches out and touches Minato's shoulder. Tanjiro smiles at him. It's kind and understanding. "You are doing a good job, Minato. I'm sure that your wife is proud of you and glad you are here with your son," he murmurs. Minato's shoulders slacken. It's hard to deny the words, hard when the air is soft and comforting and the weight on Minato's chest feels like it was lifted. "You seem to always know what to say," Minato comments, and his voice only cracks at the end. Tanjiro turns around to tend to the food again. His eyes are soft but knowing as he works with his hands. His movements are sure but gentle. He's kind in everything he does, Minato can see. Some people have the ability to just tell others' emotions. Some have the ability to tell when another is hurting or feel their pain. He offers but says nothing else. Minato shakes his head and gives Naruto a reassuring smile. His son nods but takes a moment to reach out with his chakra regardless before he turns back to Gaara. Minato pushes off the counter, feeling lighter even if something is stirring below the surface. I'm going out for a little bit. I'll be back. Minato tells Tanjiro and leaves the home in a yellow flash. Tanjiro doesn't turn but he lets out a hum of acknowledgement. Minato lands outside near the same clearing he had first run to so he could talk with the Kyuubi. He performs the clone the same way he did then, but this time he doesn't speak as Kurama settles against the same tree as before. He's observing his jailer calmly as Minato lets out a deep breath. Is there any way I could return home? Minato asks finally. Kurama watches him carefully. Not a guaranteed method. You would have to keep jumping and there is no guarantee you would end up in your dimension or even one you could survive in. Minato nods. He breathes again, closing his eyes. You won't be able to see her again until you die. A rush of pain through his chest and Minato feels tears prick in the corners of his eyes. He opens them to look at Kurama, his heart bared and broken. A part of him had hoped. A part of him had wondered if he could return to Kushina and those he had left behind. But really, he was only hurting himself. He couldn't go back, not without risking everything. There was still after death. He could see Kushina when he died, see her smiling face when this was all over after Naruto grew up and had children and Minato laughs and tears fall from his eyes. He bows his head and leans on a tree as he lets the sadness roll from him. He lets it pour out even as his heart aches. Kurama says nothing and Minato is grateful as he lets the emotions slip from him. He takes a shuddering breath, then another, and another. He thinks of Kushina's face and the final kiss that tasted of blood as she grinned at him. He thinks of how she told him to protect their son and turned to face their death. A laugh bubbles again, but this time it's wistful and full of adoration for the crazy woman that was his wife. She had turned to Obito and faced him even as she died. She had told him that he would regret targeting her precious people in her village and she had held to that promise. Minato had watched her go for Obito's throat before he was gone. He had jumped far away, holding onto his fracturing heart and his son as he pulled on every little bit of chakra he could and jumped. He took a leap of faith, and it was enough. It got him here. It protected his son from Obito and Akatsuki and even saved Gaara from the fate that would have befallen him if he had remained in that world. Minato raises his head, looking up at the heavens and closing his eyes. His choice was the right one. He wasn't wrong. It wasn't a mistake. He was needed here and already he had made vast changes in this world. He was sure of it. He took another deep breath, another, and then one more. He let the chilled air flow through his lungs and back out as his body regulated his temperature. A mist formed as he warmed the condensation in the air and Minato felt something lift from his chest. There's something else, Minato, Kurama speaks. Minato turns around to the Biju, finding him watching his container carefully. What is it? He asks, brow furrowing. I can feel all of them, Kurama says. Minato's eyes widen. He halts in his tracks and his arms drop. What? He asks in surprise. Kurama huffs and stalks forward, coming to stand in front of Minato. I can feel all of my siblings. Matabi, Isobu, Son Goku, Kokuo, Seiken, Chome, and Gyuki. I can feel every single one of them in this world. Minato's breath catches in his throat. That's 8. 8-tailed beasts. 8 other than himself. 8 other Jinchuriki in this world where they weren't supposed to be. Minato hits the ground, eyes wide. Kurama vanishes in a burst of smoke and Minato's throat feels dry. What the hell happened? What the hell did he do? Then again. Minato thinks of the alternative. He thinks of all of the Jinchuriki in a world with Obito and Akatsuki trying to fight for their survival. Kids like Gaara and Naruto, adults with no other choice who grew up like Kushina. Minato thinks of them and he laughs as he runs a hand through his hair. He shakes his head and smiles at the ground. Okay. Then we better get busy. He murmurs to the being inside of him. He found Gaara. He's not going to stop till he finds the others. He chose to protect Naruto because Naruto was his flesh and blood, but really, the other Jinchuriki deserved protection too. Some of them were strong enough to defend themselves but maybe not strong enough to handle what this world would throw at them. Minato had inadvertently dragged them here. He'd ensure they were safe as an apology for removing that choice from them. He takes a deep breath, then another. He settles himself and rises to his feet. He reaches out and feels for his son's chakra. It's getting dark and food will be ready soon. Minato turns and heads back to the house. He has work to do. And it's going to start with telling his son the truth. Naruto sits in his mindscape, staring up at the towering figure of the fox. Kurama, his name is. Or at least that's the name that his father had called the fox even as it growled at him. Naruto contains him. He has him sealed inside of him. But so does his dad. So does Gaara. Gaara contains a different beast than his dad, but Naruto doesn't think it means anything different when they are both the same. He looks up at the fox and smiles. He's 6 years old and he already knows what loss feels like. He's 6 years old and he has a handful of friends, some more like what he thought siblings felt like than friends. He's 6 years old and he's the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, Kurama. Naruto reaches out with his hand and the fox stops arguing with his father to look down at him. He leans down, allowing Naruto to touch his muzzle as the boy grins brightly. "Thank you for protecting us, Kurama," he calls. The fox choked. Minato laughs, the sound fond as he ruffles his son's hair and picks him up. Naruto doesn't stop reaching out to the fox, but the fox also doesn't pull away. "Thank you for keeping us safe, Kurama. I'm glad I have a friend like you." He grins brightly. Minato buried his face in his hair and laughed. He couldn't help it as his shoulders shook. Leave it to his son. I Drabble a chance encounter. He isn't sure how he got to this point. He can see the haze playing out slowly. A woman, a child, a monster. He doesn't like how it looks. He hasn't been in control of himself for some time, but these past few months in this strange land have given him his life back. He can make his own choices now. And he chooses not to let her die. With a burst of the red haze inside of him, he appears between the woman and her pursuer. There's a note of shock, but he's focused on the dangerous man in front of him. Rainbow eyes. Pretty features. Malice is hidden under nothing but faked emotions. He doesn't think twice. The woman shouts at him, telling him the pretty boy is dangerous, but so is he. He draws up water, using the snow in the area to fuel it as it bursts forward and slams into the man. There's the faintest edge of surprise. He turns and grabs the woman. She's holding her kid tightly. He isn't going to let her go. He runs. Bursts of practiced speed with chakra-laden traps left behind at each pulse. He can feel the being coming after them. Faster than he thought possible. He uses the red haze, pulls on it, and now they are flickering fast enough the woman whimpers. He tucks her head to his chest, ignores the pounding in his heart, and runs. He had felt the man's power, had seen how fast he was. He isn't delusional to think he can face him. There was very little chakra in the figure's movements, but he could tell the danger. There's a rush at his side. He pushes harder, dodges the grab, and suddenly they are in a game of intense cat and mouse. The woman and child are still tucked close, but he can't stop for fear of them taking a hit. He's careful enough with the red haze. He wishes he had another way to escape. He will just have to settle for slowing the man down. His next jump spawns in several clones and he switches places with one before they break in different directions. Each one is holding a copy of the woman in her bundle. Several disappear in all manner of terrible ways, but he's still running, putting distance. They vanish slower now, the being chasing them having a note of frustration when it kills the last clone that isn't him. He hides a grin behind a sure smile. The sun is coming up, warm on his face. He expects they will be safe now. They burst out into a clearing, the heat of the rising sun covering him as he finally stops. It's more open from here out, with areas cleared for buildings in a nearby village. He turns to make sure the woman and child are safe. She stares at him with wide green eyes. She's pretty. Much prettier than the red-headed harpy who is always by his side. Or the harpy who used to be at his side. He doesn't even know if she's alive now. He doesn't know how long it's been since he saw her. "Are you unharmed?" he asks calmly. Her face flushes and she turns her head to her child, checking on the young boy. He's a toddler but he's swaddled in cloth. "Inosuke, are you okay?" "Oh, I'm so sorry, Inosuke," she rambles, focused entirely on her son. She flushes when he sets her down and starts to press a hand to her head, eyes searching the rest of her for injuries. "Unharmed. Safe." He relaxes. He doesn't know a lot about medical ninjutsu. Maybe the harpy had a point when she said he needed to learn, regardless of the being inside of him. The red cloak fizzles out as he meets her gaze. He offers a diplomatic smile, a practiced one. "Sorry for the sudden intrusion. I just had to ensure your safety." She nods, her eyes softening. Thank you." She calls out, reaching out and winding her arms around his neck. The hug doesn't last long. She pulls away with a flushed face as she holds her son instead. He looks away while his cheeks pink. Damn harpy. He can just hear her laughing at him. "Let's get you somewhere safe," he mutters, rising to his feet. He offers her a hand as he gestures to the town. "We can get you some clothes for the weather there, but I don't think it is wise to stay so close to here," he tells her. He intends to find a safe place to put her and just leave her there. She smiles gently at him, green eyes falling shut. "She's really pretty," he notes. "Thank you so very much." He huffs. Yeah, come on." She takes his hand and he leads her to the city. With a start, she realizes how short he is. He's a few inches shorter than her with dusty blonde hair and stunning pink eyes. Her gaze softens. Maybe she shouldn't trust a stranger, especially after where it got her and Inosuke before, but she feels like it's okay. She holds his hand, lets him guide her to the village, and says nothing else. She has a feeling that she and Inosuke are in good hands. Chapter 22. Birth of Two Souls, Rise to Final Selection. Minato stirs in the morning to the house coming alive. It's Tanjiro who rises first and begins to gather his family's things. Kai is next though Minato is up and ready so she just has to sit and watch as Minato seals away their belongings in scrolls. His abilities still surprise them but they manage to accept them easily enough. Maybe it's because the Kamado family isn't quite normal either, or maybe it's because Minato is careful not to overwhelm them with too many of his skills at once. Either way, their belongings are sealed by the time the boys wake up. Tanjiro goes to his mother and she greets him as he lies next to her tiredly. His eyes watch Minato even as he rests his head on his mother's stomach. He giggles when he gets a few kicks inside of her stomach and only gets up to run to Gaara when the boy enters. Naruto greets the boy calmly, shifting to go to his father. Minato ruffles his hair and tells him to gather his things so they can go. He kisses Naruto's forehead and sends his son on his way. The boy nods and yawns. He's too cute, Minato thinks as he watches his son head to the room. For once he's too tired to be excited, the night before proving to have been heavy. Tanjiro helps Minato gather the rest of what they can and when Naruto is ready Minato gathers everyone together and takes them away. Ruka is waiting for them when they appear. She's alone since Shinjiro and Kyojuro are out on patrol. Her eyes soften and she greets the newcomers. She and Kai get along easily and Tanjiro isn't far behind as introductions are made. Gaara takes some time to get used to the woman, but her gentle nature with Naruto and Tanjiro helps him warm up to her. Tanjiro is mesmerized by her. He keeps looking between his mother and Ruka. Minato hums and guides the family over to where Ruka set up their rooms. They are in another area of the house but not far from the center where everyone else is. Minato gives the Kamados a tour and helps them unpack their things for the rest of the morning. Kai settles with Ruka and the two mothers talk until the move is finished. They both realize that they are far enough along in their pregnancies that they will likely give birth around the same time, and it sparks an easy kinship between them. Minato watches them and his eyes soften. He shows the others around and Naruto is quick to tell Gaara about his room, and the rooms of the others. Hiroko's is about the only room that isn't a mess, and also the one that is used the most. Giyu and Sabito have been to the estate off and on, even going between Jigero's estate whenever he has the time to welcome them. Hitori has his room even if it's not used nearly as often as the others. The last time was on his way passing through with Haseharu, his other student who happened to be in his late teens. The boy was polite but firm and he struck an easy friendship with the elder of the kids. Minato makes comments about all the kids to the newcomers, hoping he can introduce them at some point but perhaps not too soon. He wants the Kamados to settle in before things pick up. The first day is all about getting them comfortable. The second is much the same, though it comes with the introductions of Kyojuro and Shinjiro. As expected, Shinjiro gets along well with the newcomers. Gaara is wary of both but Naruto eases him into Kyojuro enough that he can converse with the boy. It helps that Kyojuro keeps complimenting what a good older brother Gaara is and how he can't wait for his little brother. Tanjiro likes the boy too. Minato watches as they get along and feels a burden lift from him. Hiroko arrives on the third day, but she's not with Jigoro. No, she and Makomo are tagging along with a familiar Wind Hashira. Hiroko is wearing a new kimono modified so she can use a sword with it, and Makomo is wearing a matching cut. Their tops have different patterns but Minato can see they were made by the same person. Hiroko's are edged with golden triangles carefully sewn into the light blue fabric. The pattern reminds Minato of Jigoro's cut. Makomo's kimono is baby blue and decorated with sakura blossoms at the shoulder and around the back. She also had a mask at her side, one carved by hand. Minato recognizes the mask because he watched Sakanji carve it the last time they saw each other. Hiroko also has a mask, but this one only covers half of her face and is pitch black. It mimics a masquerade mask that Minato is familiar with, but he has a feeling Sakanji drew inspiration from the tales Hiroko passed on from her mother's heritage. That answers the question of where the outfits came from. Minato is certain that Sakanji made them for both of the girls. Hitori greets him when they arrive. Hiroko shoots over to his side and grins as she hugs him, darting past him into the house to locate the boys. Minato watches her go and figures she will be alright meeting Gaara. He greets Makomo and the girl inclines her head before she goes after Hiroko. "I heard you started more trouble," Hitori teases. Minato laughs and rubs the back of his neck as the two enter the main room. Hiroko is introducing herself to Gaara and Makomo is quick to follow, both of them gentle and smiling softly at the boy. He nods to them and doesn't seem too uncomfortable. His eyes drift to Hitori and he tenses at the arrival of a new adult, but Hitori only nods at him and keeps his distance. Minato gives him a grateful glance and Hitori shrugs as he introduces himself to Tanjiro and Kai. His smile wins them over easily, as does his gentle teasing of Minato over the situation. The house is a tad bit louder again but no one complains. The third day is when Minato starts training again. Hiroko and Makomo show him their progress in not only breathing styles but also with their chakra. He had shown them the beginning stages of medical ninjutsu at their request several weeks ago, and now they showed him how far they had come. They were already surpassing his skills in the area thanks to their carefully monitored reserves. Makomo had a good amount of control while Hiroko had more chakra and could heal larger injuries. They were interested in learning more but Minato could only offer them so much. He had to tell them that at some point they would have to keep learning without him. His skills were limited and his only source of knowledge was Kurama, and even then, the fox had a limited amount of memories to recall from his other containers. Minato tried his best but the girls realized they would have to learn more on their own and told him to focus on Naruto and Gaara. He did, even if it hurt that he couldn't teach them much more. Hattori pitched in where he could but he only stayed one more day before he was gone again. The girls remained where they were, having been drifting between estates so they could learn as much as they could. Kyojuro tried to pick up what medical knowledge he could too, though he found himself learning about as much as Minato before he too was lost to the girls and what they were discovering. He still helped where he could and they sparred as much as they were able. Minato began to teach Naruto and Gaara how to access their Biju and the chakra they contained. It was slow progress but Minato wanted to keep it that way. He didn't want to rush the boys or get them hurt. They may have agreements with the Biju inside of them but that meant nothing when they were faced with the torrent of chakra inside of them with no real understanding of how to handle it. The days continued to pass. Progress was made and by the end of the week when Minato had to leave for more patrols with Shinjiro, he was confident that Naruto and Gaara could manage small bursts of the Biju chakra. Gaara had even learned how to water walk with Makomo and Hiroko's help. Minato left with well wishes from the Kamados and the kids. Ruka kissed Shinjiro goodbye and waved Minato off until they were far from the estate. They worked quickly to get to their destination and finish their tasks but one could only rush so much. Few demons posed threats to either of them but Minato was still careful as he and Kyojuro handled their targets. They worked well together too. Shinjiro watched his back and Minato watched Shinjiro's in turn. They had become a formidable pair, enough that many demons had started to recount them in fear. Word of their strength spread. Minato didn't pay too much attention to it. The demons they caught died quickly and those that barely managed to escape they often caught later on. Their days progressed as normal even if Minato missed the kids and Shinjiro sent letters back whenever his crow wasn't busy. It was the 12th day of the 12th month when things changed. A few days after they had left, Minato opened his eyes to his chakra being tugged at. He froze in his bedroll, shooting to his feet as he reached for the chakra. It was Naruto's seal. He was quick to get ready. The tug was only one pulse and while it wasn't an urgent tug like Minato had taught his son, it was still there. A warning, or maybe just a frantic pull. Naruto wasn't in danger but something was wrong. Minato urged his companion awake and informed him of what was going on. Shinjiro rose just as quickly at his insistence. The two of them gathered their supplies at a record pace and when they were ready, Shinjiro took Minato's hand as they flickered out of place. He left a marker behind just in case, but when they arrived the sinking feeling grew. The house was frantic. Kyojuro was hovering over Naruto and Gaara while Tanjiro was huddled between them. Hiroko and Makomo weren't in sight but Minato could feel them in the house. There was an air of worry and wariness that wouldn't go away. Tanjiro greeted them when they arrived. He had stress lining his shoulders but he was also calm, leading Minato to relax a fraction. Shinjiro took notice of his absent wife and jerked to Tanjiro for answers. Ruka went into labor. Kai and the girls are with her right now. Tanjiro informs them. Minato's eyes widen. He's shocked, and a little worried. Shinjiro is gone as quickly as Tanjiro finished his last word. He's beelining it to his room where Minato can feel Ruka's steady pulse of chakra underneath a layer of discomfort. Kai and the girls are with her, but there is tension in the air and Minato can feel their worry. He nods to Tanjiro, trusting him to handle the kids. He calls out for Shinjiro's crow, and when the aged bird comes, he tells him to inform the master's estate and then the other Hashira before he rushes over to the room. Ruka is clinging to her husband when he arrives. The girls are listening to Kai's words and helping her. Minato's mind flashes back to Kushina, to the night Naruto was born. He tugs himself to the present and gets to work. He settles next to Ruka as she huffs and gasps. She's struggling, but Minato isn't going to let anything happen to her. Not here, not now. His hands glow green and Kai gives him a sharp look. Come on Shinjiro. Shinjiro murmurs. His wife smiles at him through tired lashes and past the pained expression she bears. They all get to work. The house is mostly silent for the rest of the night. Kyojuro paces next to the boys and only Naruto reaching out calms him. He's a mess of nerves and his eyes are constantly drifting to the other side of the house. Tanjiro sits next to them and calmly talks to them. Tanjiro is in his lap and looking around worriedly while Gaara is tucked against his side. Naruto leans closer, desperate for some comfort without his father there. Kyojuro is too, but he's less obvious about it up until Tanjiro offers him a hand. The boy leans in and lets Tanjiro offer him comfort. He relaxes into the embrace and only then does Kyojuro realize he's shaking. He knew something was wrong when his mother struggled to get up that morning. He knew that something wasn't right when she went into labor and Kai and the others were worried. He trusts Hiroko and Makomo. He trusts Minato and he trusts his father to take care of his mother and his little brother. He's still worried, but he trusts them. He tucks against Tanjiro's side and waits. They can only wait. Hiroko is the first to leave the room, followed by Makomo. The girls look exhausted, but they are smiling as they tell Kyojuro he can go see his family. Minato steps out as the boy ducks inside the room. Kai comes out after, turning around as Minato pauses in the doorway to look back through the crack in the shogi doors. Ruka is tiredly propped against her husband. She's alive and well if exhausted. In her arms is a small baby boy, tucked inside a bright red cloth. Shinjiro calls Kyojuro over and the boy drops next to his mother as she tilts the little form toward his brother. Kyojuro, this is Shinjiro. He's your little brother, she murmurs. Minato closes the door to give the family some privacy. His chest aches, but he lets it go as he smiles. He can see a flicker of Kushina. He hears screaming, but it's overwhelmed by the sense of warmth wafting from a woman with brilliant red hair as she holds a tiny golden-haired child. He can see the night clearly as he closes his eyes. He can see Kushina holding Naruto, peering at him with her violet eyes filled with so much love that Minato wanted to cry. She had clung to him, held Naruto close as she told him how happy she was that he had come. That night was one of the worst of Minato's life, but it was also the best. He opens his eyes to see Kai watching him. She offers him a tired smile and he returns it as they head back to the others. Naruto springs up and Minato drops to catch him. He sighs and inhales as he buries his face in his son's hair. They cling to each other for comfort and Naruto relaxes against his father as he senses that things are all right. Kai settles next to Tanjiro and Gaara, allowing her exhaustion to show as she curls next to them. Tanjiro is still asleep, but she settles one hand on his head and the other around Gaara to tug them close. Hiroko and Makomo end up pressed against Minato too and he opens his arms to accept them. They are obviously exhausted and Hiroko soon falls asleep from the stress of the night and the chakra they used. Makomo follows and Minato chuckles as he praises the girls. They did wonderfully. They followed every instruction and their prowess with Iryo ninjutsu helped save Ruka from a deadly fate. He was glad he taught them. He was glad he was there. Minato gathers the kids in his arms and heads to bed. He knows that Shinjiro will come and get him if anything happens, so he settles down in the covers and allows himself to rest. It's been a long day. Well wishes come and the master arrives with his wife and Kaguya in tow. The little boy meets Senjiro and is infatuated with him. Kyojiro can hardly let his brother go and his eyes are always fixated on the boy. Naruto and the others get to hold Senjiro soon after Ruka has rested, but Kaguya's encounter is the one that sticks with Minato. The little boy looks at Senjiro with a soft smile as he spreads that calming presence. His father can't quite see, but he smiles at the meeting regardless. They head home and leave behind a good number of gifts. A few more days pass, allowing Ruka to rest and Shinjiro to settle in with his family. He was given a month away from his duties while the other Hashira picked up his tasks. Minato helps. He can't quite stop himself from jumping in to help when the family is so excited about its new member. He brings the new Slayers around whenever he can and teaches them more techniques, working on their chakra control until he is certain they're on the right track. The day for the final selection is quickly approaching and Minato wonders just how odd it will be when the grand event that they have been preparing for finally comes to pass. They have a few more weeks. After that, it will be time. He's looking forward to it even though he dreads it. Kai scares him and Tanjiro one night when she suddenly stops in the kitchen, her eyes wide. Ruka is watching her carefully and Tanjiro shoots up as Kai tells them the words that Minato had been expecting, but perhaps not this soon. Nezuko is coming. She tells them and soon the house is sent into a flurry of movement again. The girls are thankfully still present, so Minato takes them and Tanjiro into a room to help. He has the most experience out of all of them in this regard, surprisingly, and he's good enough at medical ninjutsu to help if something goes wrong. Nothing does, thankfully. Kai has a much easier time than Ruka and soon they are welcoming another small body into the world. Nezuko has a tiny tuft of black hair and her eyes shine brightly when she opens them. Minato can't help but feel happy as Kai looks at the little girl, gently handing her to Gaara. He's the second person to hold her, Tanjiro around his side and helping him hold her properly. His green eyes watch her in silent awe as Gaara focuses completely on the tiny figure in his arms. Minato can tell that Gaara is immediately devoted, his eyes centered on the little girl and refusing to leave. He smiles and gives the family privacy so he can go see the others. The days drag on. The final selection seems to come far too quickly. One day Minato is cooing at baby Senjiro and baby Nezuko. The next he is standing at the gates of the Rengoku estate with Hiroko, Mikomo, and Kyojiro in tow. They wave and Ruka kisses her son's head and demands he stay safe. She comes to hug Hiroko too, patting Mikomo on the head. Urokodaki is there to visit the new additions to the family and see Mikomo off, and he takes care by hugging her tightly and telling her to come home in one piece. Minato can see he is shaking and he tells Minato to watch the kids before dragging the man into a tight hug. It surprises him enough that Minato can't even speak the affirmative. He turns to Hiroko and drags her in, adding Kyojiro for good measure. The rest of the kids are next and Jigoro even comes over to pat Hiroko's head and wish her well. The adults each eye Minato and he knows what they want even without them asking. He nods and turns to face the kids. Naruto watches him closely, bright eyes dimmed at the idea of not seeing his father for a week or more. Minato crouches and opens his arms. Naruto lunges into them. tears forming in the corners of his eyes even as he holds them back. "It'll be okay," Minato murmurs into his ear. He ruffles his son's hair and Naruto nods. "I know. You are strong. You and Kyo ni, Hiroko ne, and Mikomo ne," Naruto murmurs back. Minato nods and chuckles. "We are. You take care of the others while I'm gone, okay? Help Ruka and Kai and show Gaara around," Minato tells him as he ruffles his son's hair one last time. At Naruto's nod, Minato gently pulls away and rises to his feet. He takes in the others and inclines his head at the Hashira. Tanjiro waves him off with a kind smile and Minato gathers the rest of the kids as the goodbyes die down. The three eldest huddle next to him and Minato takes hold of them before they disappear in a yellow flash. It's time to get things rolling. It's time for him to put all his work to use. The final selection is different from what Minato imagined. They arrive at the mountain base and hike their way up to the meeting spot through a large orchard of wisteria trees. The trees are thick enough that Minato can't see normal trees past them. He knows from the other Hashira that the mountain is surrounded by wisteria trees, but he hadn't imagined it would be this apparent. Hiroko and Mikomo hold onto one another. They haven't let go of each other's hands even when they reach the meeting spot on the mountain. Kyojuro stays behind them, his hand on his sword even as he marvels at the mountain. Minato watches them with pride in his chest. He feels his heart pound all the same, worry and fear burning under the surface. He has to protect them. They're all coming back safe. He won't let anything happen to them. Hiroko finally turns when they reach the top. She reaches for Kyojuro and grips his arm with her free hand. He sends her a bright smile and she returns it. Minato can see that she is nervous. She's holding onto her friends and there is an edge of uncertainty to her. Mikomo grips her hand, casts her a smile, and pulses her chakra. Hiroko swallows a lump in her throat and nods, breathing out heavily. She takes another deep breath and settles into total concentration as her eyes open. Her gaze is firm now, completely focused on her goal. At the bottom of the mountain are a large number of other recruits. Minato takes stock of all of them. He notes them and catalogs just how he's going to go about ensuring they stay safe. The kids are going to try to help too, but he can't expect them to cover over 50 other people. He pulses his chakra and clones pop into place outside of the view of those readying for the selection. He lets them lie in wait and turns to the kids. There are a lot of students, Hiroko voices as she casts her eyes over the gathered slayers. Well, slayers to be. Some of them wouldn't make it that far, and others might just succeed. Tu-san says that there are typically 50 to 60 recruits every selection, and the selections are held twice a year, Kyojuro speaks. His volume draws the attention of others and soon eyes are peering at them in wonder. Most of the recruits are at least 14 if not 15 or 16. Kyojuro might be mistaken for 12 but none of them looked the proper age. Mikomo looked 9, not 12. Minato was also a sore thumb but he ignored the attention in favor of taking everything in. When he finally turned back to the kids he drew 3 of his specialty kunai. Here, you all know the drill. I trust you to handle yourselves but we have to get home alive. If you need to, you send this out, understood? Minato tells them. They each turn and take a kunai. Minato doesn't want to take any chances. They all meet his gaze and nod sharply. Minato smiles and ruffles their hair one at a time. Kyojuro preens under the attention while Mikomo only smiles and Hiroko flushes darkly. Hello. a calm tone calls. Their attention deviates and Minato is shocked to see a familiar boy standing at the head of the throng of slayers. Kaguya watches the rest of the slayers turn to face him and he begins to recite the rules for finale selection. He meets Minato's gaze when he says that those who fail will be sent back to their trainers this year. There is murmuring among the slayers. They are shocked by the change in what they have been told, but some of them seem to relax at the stipulation that they could survive. Kaguya smiles and raises his hand. "You may begin your trek to the top of the mountain," he calls, waving his hand in dismissal. The slayers take off. The kids stay together and Minato bids them one last nod before he flickers away. This next week is going to be hectic. Kyojuro isn't sure what he thinks of the final selection. His father had warned him that it would be difficult and that he would be pushed to his limits, especially with how young he was. Even so, he wasn't quite prepared for the demons that descended upon them. A majority of the demons were focused on getting easy kills. Kyojuro froze up more than once and only Mikomo and Hiroko at his side pushed him forward. Once he remembered who he was with, Kyojuro fell into a flow. He took out several demons and helped his friends tackle the others. They saved several slayers even when the slayers didn't appreciate it. Most of them hated the mountain or feared it. Surprisingly, Kyojuro only found that he would be glad when the final selection was finished. The first day was a whirlwind of demons, saving other slayers, and sticking close to the girls. They never strayed further than the line of sight from one another for fear of losing each other in the winding forests. When the night began to dwindle and the sun shone over the tops of the trees, they finally set up camp in the woods. Hiroko held first watch, then Mikomo, and finally Kyojuro until they all got their amount of sleep. They made simple meals using supplies they sealed away and even managed to earn a few more friends when other slayers dropped by. Some of the recruits began to murmur about a yellow shadow in the woods. The trio shared looks and smiles over their food as they realized that Minato had been busy too. Hiroko drew a deep breath, bringing her blade around sharply as she launched into the air with a twisting motion. First form, Maelstrom. She calls and slices through the neck of her target. The demon falls in a heap, but she's not done. More demons are coming. Third form, Flowing Dance. Mikomo calls calmly as she slides under Hiroko and brings her blade up in a flowing pattern. She weaves through the next series of demons. Behind them, Hiroko can hear Kyojuro's steady breaths as he decapitates his demon. The group that had tried to fight them fell quickly under their combined prowess and techniques. A glint catches Hiroko's eye and she launches into the air, catching a branch with her free hand and swinging up onto its surface. A demon sails past her position and she falls back, letting the air catch her as the demon gapes. Wind breathing. Fifth form, Cold Mountain Wind. She shouts and the swirling wind follows her blade as she sweeps it around and slices through the demon. It falls and she lands with a chakra-assisted flip. Her eyes flit around carefully to take notice of any more demons. Thankfully, that seems to be the last one. Mikomo hums and comes to stand next to her while Kyojuro grins and helps another slayer they had rescued to his feet. He stutters, eyes wide as he looks at them. Hiroko supposes they're quite the sight. She's relatively unharmed and the others are much the same. They also work well together, so well that no demon has proven to cause them enough trouble to worry them. The last 2 days have passed quickly. They are almost halfway through the final selection and elation runs through Hiroko's blood. They are strong, stronger than a few months ago when she only had 4 forms under her belt. They are strong enough to hold their own against one demon individually, but together? Together she feels like they could tackle anything. She knows some demons are stronger and that only weak demons are placed on the mountain, but even so Hiroko has high hopes. Mikomo and Kyojuro share their sentiments. They come up to her and plot their next course of action. The sun is rising soon and they want to make more headway to the top of the mountain again. She smiles, takes Mikomo's hand and Kyojuro's, and the three of them take off with chakra-assisted leaps. They miss the smiling face watching them from behind a tree. Minato chuckles and shakes his head as he offers to take the Slayer they saved to safety or to let him stay. Predictably he takes the safe route. Minato flickers with him and appears at the base of the mountain. Several Kikuchi wait with other Slayers that Minato has had to take back. There are less than half of what they started with on the mountain now, but Minato is just glad that none of the other Slayers have died this time around. He turns back to the mountain and flickers away. He has more work to do. Mikomo calmly looks around her area. It's the final day of the selection and she's growing sure of her abilities. Enough that she's not worried even though Kyojuro and Hiroko aren't directly beside her. She's away from Hiroko and Kyojuro after they split up to help another Slayer. Mikomo chased another Slayer, attempting to help him even though it broke her from her friends. He had run from something in panic after Mikomo and the others had dropped in on several smaller demons chasing students. Her blue eyes scan the area. She can tell that this area has been mostly untouched by others. Her eyes shift over the underbrush for signs of life. She locates the other Slayer hiding in the underbrush and walks over calmly. She had been surprised by how desperately he had run away. "Hey, are you all right?" She asks calmly and outstretches a hand. The Slayer looks up, eyes wide and blinking back a haze of tears. He's about 14 and would tower over Mikomo if he wasn't shivering in the bushes. "You need to leave, you have to run." "It's coming," the boy starts, his gaze frantic. He keeps tossing his head back and forth, trying to locate something in the darkness. Mikomo frowns, lips tilting down. "Where?" she asks. She pulses her chakra. Minato had been attempting to teach them some sensing techniques but only Naruto and Mikomo could detect demons now. Hiroko could feel vague outlines of chakra but she struggled with differentiating them. Mikomo feels around and stills. She's felt a dozen demons at this point. She's fought a large amount with her friends and Urokodaki at her side, but never one with this much potency. Her whole body tenses as she feels the presence surround her completely. It's suffocating. The boy in front of her looks just as terrified as a shadow looms over them. "Oh my, a little fox," it begins. Mikomo tries to push herself to move. She's channeling chakra into her limbs but she can't move. "Mikomo!" A shout echoes and suddenly Mikomo gets tackled out of the way. Blood splatters. Her eyes are locked on the spot in the bushes she had just been standing in front of. The boy is gone. She can see half of his face but the other half is crushed under a massive green hand. Blood covers the ground and the bushes and the smell won't go away. It's heavy and metallic, infringing on all of Mikomo's senses as she watches the hands lift away from the crushed figure. "Mikomo, snap out of it." The person holding her shouts and Mikomo jolts as she's tossed like a rag doll. She hits another's arms and she smells a rush of fire and coal. Kyojuro. Her head jerks as she's pulled from her haze and her eyes center on Hiroko. Hiroko is standing where she tossed Mikomo, her blade brought up to slice through a fist aiming to crush her. She backpedals, flips, and has to whip her blade around again as another hand whips around to grab her leg. The haze is overwhelming, so Mikomo drops her senses. She breathes easier even as terror grips her chest. "Hiroko!" Mikomo shouts and she nudges Kyojuro off of her as she darts ahead. Hiroko grits her teeth and barely dodges another set of arms as not one, but 4 arms come after her. Fourth form, striking tide. Mikomo shouts and leaps into the mess of limbs. She twists and strikes multiple blows as she cuts through the arms and sends blood flying. She ignores the stench of demon ichor and instead faces her new opponent. Green skin flashes in her vision first. Then, the monstrous appearance. Mikomo has to swallow bile as she stares at the demon who had attacked them and killed the other recruit. Mikomo can't think about that. Can't think about how she got someone killed. His beady yellow eyes catch hers from where his face is obscured under the haze of multiple hands. Dozens of grotesque green hands cover its body, waving around threateningly as he stares her down. "Oh, little fox, finally I found you. It's been such a boring week. I haven't had too much to eat, but now I get to enjoy one of you delicious foxes," it says, and Mikomo shudders at the twisted pleasure in its tone. She felt its gaze on her mask and choked. The fox mask that Urokodaki carved for her. Hiroko lands next to her, blade drawn and at the ready. Kyojuro lands on Mikomo's other side and he grimaces. "Oh, and you have friends. Delicious," it calls, its eyes wandering over each of them. It pauses when it takes in Hiroko's mask hanging on the side of her belt. "And another fox?" "No, but that's Sakonji's handiwork." "You must be one of his too," he says gleefully. Mikomo's throat feels dry. "How do you know Urokodaki-sensei?" Question mark. She demands. Her heart is thudding in her chest even as she holds up total concentration. The monstrous demon laughs, its hands rising to wave in the air. Almost like it's shrugging. "Well, he's the bastard that locked me in here all those years ago," he shouts, his playfulness quickly becoming annoyed and furious. Hiroko grabs Mikomo's shoulder and Kyojuro nods as they all launch back several more feet. The demon chuckles at this. "No demon should be that old on this mountain," Hiroko begins. The demon scoffs. "What period is its little girl?" he asks, and Hiroko gulps. Kyojuro is the one to answer. "It's the 32nd year of the Meiji era." The demon screams in frustration. The kids back off further and Hiroko lets out a terrified sound as they all reach for the kunai on their sides. The demon stomps around, throwing a temper tantrum as it screams and shouts. "That damned Urokodaki! How dare you leave me here to rot? I swear I will make him pay. I'll eat every one of his foxes and tear him to shreds." Quote. Beady eyes narrow on them again. "You'll make the 13th fox child I get to eat. And the rest of you will make it 50 children that I have consumed," the demon calls with glee. Its eyes narrow as it sees them backing away and its hands launch. Hiroko goes to the left, and Kyojuro and Mikomo have to go right. They narrowly avoid the hands and suddenly have to fight an onslaught of the hands as they try to capture them. Mikomo slices through several, but she feels like they are almost endless. Kyojuro has to tug her away from another onslaught and they both take to hanging on a tree to avoid another blow. The demon lets out a surprised noise at this. Mikomo grabs for her kunai and feels a rush of terror when she can't find it. She looks around and catches sight of something else. Across the field, Hiroko is struggling just as much. Her impressive flexibility seems to be aiding her in the fight, but she can hardly stop or she'll be grabbed. Mikomo sees the hand coming around the back of her friend too late. She lunges with a cry, but Hiroko barely turns around in time to block the blow. It strikes her and sends her flying. She thuds against the ground and Mikomo lands in front of her with a spinning whirlwind of water at the edge of her blade. Sixth form, Whirlpool. She calls and the slashes cut through the arm that struck Hiroko with enough force that the demon screams in pain. Kyojuro drops and grabs Hiroko, hoisting her up to her feet even as she cries out. She bites her lip and coughs. The strike hit her chest hard. She was gasping and trying to even her breaths, but Kyojuro could see the pain on her face. He grimaced and reached for the kunai at his side. He wasn't hopeful for their success in this fight and they had to survive. He found nothing. Terror raced through him and he raised his head to look up and see 3 familiar kunai dangling from the fingers of the demon as it hovered them over their heads. Looking for these? It calls gleefully. I wondered what they are for, but seeing as you all tried to get to them, then they must be important. Too bad, I'm going to tear each of you apart limb from limb and I'll enjoy consuming you all, he says, and his hands rush forward again. Mikomo readies herself and Hiroko pulls herself together. She grimaces but bites back the pain and settles on her feet. Kyojuro, Mikomo, the second formation. We have to win this, she shouts. Kyojuro watches Hiroko falter slightly. He worries, but he knows they don't have much choice and he shoots into position. Mikomo nods and readies as she twists her blade around. She takes a settling breath and then shifts her stance. Wind breathing. First form, Dust Whirlwind Cutter. She shouts and blitzes ahead. Hiroko is right behind her. First form, Thunderclap and Flash. She calls and her feet flicker with lightning as she creates a jagged trail of light up the demon. Her sword slices through the hand and Mikomo backs her up. They create the opening needed for the demon's neck. Kyojuro pulls himself together and takes a chakra-assisted run along one of the demon's limbs as he powers through his technique. Fifth form, Flame Tiger. He shouts and brings the blade down in an arch that slices right at the demon's neck. The demon cackles and Kyojuro hardly registers that his blade sinks partially into the demon's neck before he's thrown off. A smaller figure catches him and twists around. Mikomo grunts and hauls him onto a tree and out of the line of fire. Below, Hiroko is distracting the demon from them even as they begin to feel the rush of worry. Kyojuro, their strongest fighter, wasn't able to cut through the demon. Hiroko, we need to run, Mikomo shouts. She twists to her friend and sees the girl land on a tree trunk only for it to explode into a flurry of bark from the demon's strike. Hiroko holds her own, but Mikomo can see she's struggling. The demon gets a lucky strike in. Hiroko's arm snaps and she screams. She leaps away, close to the others, and lands even as she grips her wrist. Her blade falls from the branch and only Kyojuru's quick reflexes catch it. Hiroko shudders and she cradles her arm to her chest as she blinks back tears. She's holding in her cries even as her blood begins to seep into the cloth of her top. Abruptly, the demon shifts. Its pupils narrow further and it breathes in deeply. Marichi Tilda? It calls gleefully and doubles its pace to get to her. Hiroko glances back at the others. She catches Kyojuru's gaze and gives a soft smile. Get Mikomo home, she says firmly. She turns and Mikomo reaches out, but she's too late as Hiroko slips past her fingers. The girl bolts, running past the demon and across the way to a tree. She gives one last glance behind her and then she darts into the underbrush as lightning flickers under her feet. Get back here! The demon screams and barrels through the tree cover, rushing after her. Hiroko! Mikomo shouts and almost lunges after her, but Kyojuro grabs her. Mikomo, stop! We need a plan. Hiroko is the fastest of us, trust her. He says sharply. At that moment he sounds more like his father than Mikomo thought possible. Mikomo nods even as a lump grows in her throat. The demon is focused on Hiroko and maybe this is what they need. Her gaze drifts over to the clump of a body and she has to still her tears. She can't let Hiroko end up that way. She won't. Okay. What form could cut through that skin? Mikomo says in a rush. Her heart is pounding in her ears and her fingers feel clammy around the handle of her sword. She's scared, terrified. This is life or death and they can't call for Minato. Kyojuro looks down at their blades, at Hiroko's blade. They're weighing their options and coming up short. Only Hiroko has another form. Fifth form of storm breathing. If either of us can manage it, that's the only other form with more power than Flame Tiger. Kyojuro intones. He's incredibly serious as he meets Mikomo's gaze. She flinches. She's practiced the form with Hiroko but she's never truly put it to the test. Hiroko has performed it but you need both hands for it. She doesn't have much of a choice. She catalogs how much chakra she has and takes a deep breath. Let's go, she says and Kyojuro nods. She relays the plan as they hope that they can get to Hiroko quickly. Hiroko's head is pounding. There's a rush of fresh pain with each lunge she takes, lightning racing over her legs as she weaves through the forest. The hand demon is trailing behind her, tearing through trees in frustration. Part of her hopes that the ruckus will be enough to draw Minato's attention. The other part of her recognizes that if he hasn't detected this demon yet then something must be up. She flickers past a blow, her lungs stinging like needles are driving through them even as she ducks, rolls, sprains, and catches branches and other limbs, using her chakra to keep her going. Her body aches and her wrist hasn't stopped hurting from where she's tied it to her front hastily. She's far from Mikomo and Kyojuro though, and that's what matters. She wanted to protect them but all she could do is give them an escape route. For once she was grateful for her blood. She was grateful that she could help even if it wouldn't end well. Hiroko rolled behind a tree, stopping only momentarily to tug some kanaya laced with wisteria. They weren't the most effective unless one wanted to hinder a demon, but she was running out of options. She tossed them at the demon's eyes and watched in satisfaction as one struck true while the others were blocked. The demon cried out, rearing back and thrashing around as it tried to swat her like a fly. She bolted to the side as pain raced up her legs like fire. She swore that her muscles were tearing with each jump from how much pain rushed in the limbs. She stumbled on her next jump. Her heart caught in her throat as she saw the next limb coming for her. She pushed to dodge, but she was too slow. She cried out as she was swatted to the side. Her head spun and she tucked her arm into her chest as she rolled across the ground. Hiroko tried to lift herself from the ground but she slumped against the dirt. She was too exhausted. Her eyes shifted up and she gulped as the demon closed in. Her chakra flared, pulsing in hopes that someone would feel it. A burst across the field. Blue and red twined together as Kyojuro lunged across her vision, his blade glinting in the moonlight. Third form, Blazing Universe. He shouts and brings his blade down as he concentrates. The echo of flames burns brightly in Hiroko's vision as Kyojuro slices through the demon's arms and lands a few feet ahead of her. From behind the demon, a small figure becomes apparent. She soars into the air with a chakra-assisted leap, raising her blade over her head. Hiroko's eyes widen when she recognizes the form. She's practiced it enough to recognize it. Stay the hell away from them. Mikomo shouts as she forces her chakra through the blow. She comes down in a sharp arc, water and lightning flickering around her in the form of a gaping draconic maw. Storm breathing. Fifth form, Storm Dragon. She cries and the rush slams into the demon from behind. Her blade hits the surface of the demon's neck. It begins to laugh, taunting her, but soon panic sets in as Mikomo pushes further, inching through the neck as the backlash of the technique forces her down. Kyojuro, help her. Hiroko shouts. The boy nods and lunges up. He lunges over the demon's limbs, racing to his neck before he arcs his blade upward opposing Mikomo's slash. Second form, Rising Scorching Sun. He shouts. The two blades make sharp sounds, cutting through the thick skin in a burning haze of water, lightning, and fire. The demon screams as its head flies from its body. Hiroko watches the head go, eyes drawn to its gleaming eyes as its body begins to disintegrate into ash. Kyojuro and Mikomo both land, though Mikomo stumbles and Kyojuro has to grab her to keep her up. They are both panting and gasping for air as the demon is left with just one arm and a half of its face. The heap of arm lands next to Mikomo and Kyojuro while the head lands beside Hiroko. En-ni-san. The demon calls and Hiroko swallows a lump when she sees the demon crying. He whimpers and she doesn't hear the frightening demon but rather a small child. Mikomo hits the ground on her knees, her fingers inching over until she grasps the hand of the demon. Rest. She whispers, her eyes brimming with tears over not only the encounter but also the cries leaving the demon's lips. The demon closes its eyes, the rest of its body vanishing. Hiroko closes her eyes. She wants nothing more than to sleep. She shouldn't, not when it's still nighttime and more demons could come. Warmth flickers next to her. A hand settles on her back and she almost cries as her eyes open to the calm countenance of Minato. His worried eyes cast over her and he pulls her up to him gently. She slumps against his side and her eyes brim with tears. Minato, she cries out, gripping him with her good hand. Kyojuro hauls Mikomo over, the two slumping against the man, and he takes a heavy breath. Hey, I'm sorry I'm late. It's okay. Rest. Minato murmurs and gathers the three of them in his arms. They all slump over, curling against one another as they realize what they just did. They survived. Against a horrendous demon far above their skill set, they survived. A tremor runs through them as sleep claims them all. Minato gazes at the pile of children in his arms. He spawns two clones to watch the area and sighs heavily. He had been dealing with a group of demons attacking several others on the other side of the mountain when he felt the pulse of Hiroko's chakra. He had to take the other slayers to the base of the mountain first. He was almost too late, but the kids had held up. His eyes drift to Mikomo. He had appeared several moments earlier in the darkness, but he had wanted the kids to finish the fight themselves. He would have stepped in if they were in danger, but they proved his trust right. They killed the monstrous demon that had tried to kill them. Minato's eyes shift to Hiroko's wrist. He grimaces and takes her small hand in his. He rights the break, ignoring her whimper in her sleep as he heals the break. It takes more effort than he would have preferred, but once he's finished, she's no longer wincing with each touch. Minato gathers the kids, setting up camp not far away as he waits for the sun to rise. The kids did admirably and survived to the very last night. They killed the demon facing them without help, a demon that shouldn't have even been here. Minato would bring that problem up to the other later. For now, he'd focus on the kids and make sure they were okay. They wake on the 7th day. They managed to survive the full length and find themselves at the checkpoint with no assistance from Minato. He merely watched over them as they rested, and when they were up he told them he'd find them after and left. He couldn't stay, as much as he wanted to. He had to ensure the other kids in the selection were safe too. Kyojuro was the only one of the trio who wasn't dragging his feet when they reached the top of the mountain. He helped Hiroko get to the top, and Mikomo wasn't far behind. Neither of the two had left the girl after yelling at her for her reckless actions. The top of the mountain seemed barren. Among those who had survived, there were only 2 others besides them. Mikomo couldn't bring herself to talk to them with how tired they were, and all 3 slumped together the moment they were told they passed. Even so, Mikomo can't feel happy. Her eyes hold ghosts, or the ghost of the boy that had been crushed because she couldn't act in time. He had died because of her. Hiroko's hand grips her arm. Kyojuro knocks his head against hers gently but with enough force to jar her from her thoughts. Her blue eyes drift to them and Hiroko offers a bitter smile. "We'll make it up to him," she says firmly. Mikomo chokes. She's not sure she can, not sure that anything can make up for him dying like that. Kyojuro huffs, the rumble of his chest against her back. "We will bury him. Set him to rest and visit him as often as we can," he says firmly. Mikomo nods. She swallows her tears and takes a deep breath as she relaxes against the others again. It's not enough, but maybe it has to be. Maybe she can't rewrite time, but she would do her darndest to make sure that he didn't die for nothing. Kagaya smiles sadly at them as he sees their downcast expressions. He then voices to the other 2 who finished that they will have time to recover before they will receive their crows and choose the metal for their swords. A flash of yellow drops in the middle of the clearing and the 2 other survivors jolt in shock. Minato ignores them as he passes Kagaya, ruffling his hair and heading over to the trio of kids. He settles next to them and offers them a tired smile. He settles on one knee and opens his arms for them. Mikomo is the first to launch into them. The tears she had been struggling to keep at bay overflow, and Minato hums as he cards a hand through her hair. "It's hard. I'm sorry I didn't get there in time," Minato murmurs and strokes her hair soothingly. Mikomo shudders. Hiroko is the next one to wind her arms around Minato and Kyojuro follows. They let it all out and Minato says nothing as he holds them close, murmuring reassurances. It doesn't get easier, he notes. Death lingers and loss never really ends. But you can still move on and work to handle it better so it doesn't happen again. They are going to lose people. They can't save everyone. It's a sad reality. Mikomo tells him what they want to do. He agrees to get the boys so they can. They all nod and tuck against him firmly. They get their crows together. Or rather, Minato, Kyojuro, and Mikomo get a crow. Shock crosses Hiroko's face when the large hawk lands on her arm. His dark feathers would have someone mistake him for a raven, but his size and countenance gave away the fact that he wasn't a normal Kasugai crow. "Oh my, you got a big one, Hiroko," Mikomo teases. She's not quite smiling, but her teasing eases her friends about her earlier thoughts. Hiroko flushes darkly at the teasing, her fingers rising to stroke the large bird on her arm. "What's your name?" she asks softly. The bird preens under the attention. "Momo." It caws and tucks its head into her fingers. Hiroko giggles and pets the feathers the way she does Inari. It proves to be a good idea as Momo butts into her fingers. Minato chuckles. His crow settles on his shoulder as it caws. I am Cage. Cage. It caws. Minato nods and pats its head while the others meet their crows. Kyojuro gets a bird named Kanami and Mikomo gets a calm bird named Tenchi. Both of them like their birds and give them a good dose of affection before they turn back to Kaguya. Kaguya gestures to a table of ore for them to choose from next. Kyojuro tilts his head as the other two slayers grab their ore, leaving the rest of them to choose. He looks at the others to get an idea of what they want to get. Mikomo steps forward. She raises her hand and takes a deep breath, closing her eyes. She shifts her hands over a few and finally stops and grabs an ore to the far right. Hiroko glances at Kyojuro and shrugs. She walks over and observes the ore. She raises her hand too, but this time she channels some of her lightning chakra. One of the ores flickers, sparking. She takes that one. Kyojuro goes next, using the same idea but choosing the ore that reacts best to his fire chakra. When Minato goes, he just takes his ore without waiting. He winks at the others when they cast him questioning glances. They are left to their own devices as Kaguya informs them that their blades will be created soon. Their uniforms will also be delivered to their assigned residences. Minato gathers them when they've finished. The trio can't help but be grateful when they realize they don't have to walk home. He's a dang godsend. They go back home, appearing outside of the estate. There's a group waiting for them and Hiroko goes down as Naruto lunges for her. Mikomo gets tugged into the arms of Urokodaki as he lets out a sharp and wounded sound, holding her close. Kyojuro gets enveloped by his father in a tight hug. Minato watches with a budding warmth, crouching next to where Naruto has tackled Hiroko so he can tug the boy off of her. He pulls Hiroko up with his son, tucking the two close. We're home, he murmurs. Chapter 23. Dancing sun, burning time. The frigid air brushes over her skin. Her cheeks burn as she huddles next to Minato's side. Hiroko glances up at Minato through her bundled clothing. He's smiling and he chuckles as he reaches down to adjust her scarf so it can cover more of her face. She murmurs her thanks and flushes when Minato tugs her close to his side. Naruto is bundled just as much as she is, but he doesn't seem to be struggling with the cold nearly as much. He's running ahead with Sabito and Giyu. The two boys are used to the frigid temperatures and so they handle themselves better. Hiroko likes snow but it's too damn cold. She sniffles and sneezes, shaking her head as she feels her scarf rub her cold nose. She's shivering but being tucked against Minato is helping the rest of her stay warm. Another warm figure presses at her side and when Hiroko looks, she sees Kyojuro standing next to her. He wears the least number of layers of the kids and he gives her a bright smile as he reaches out to take her hand. Hiroko flushes but grips his hand when she feels how warm it is. Kyojuro radiates heat almost as much as Minato does, trapping her between the two and helping with the frigid air. We can stop here. Tanjiro set up over here so we should be fine, Minato tells her and Hiroko lets out a sigh of relief. Minato keeps a hand on her shoulder and looks up. The group is bundled for the snowstorm around them because of the Kamados. The family tradition was happening and Tanjiro had invited the others to watch. It was New Year's Eve and they were waiting for the man to start. He was wearing very little clothing compared to the rest of them. Hiroko wasn't sure how he managed it. Then again, Minato was wearing a scarf and a haori over his usual outfit rather than the multiple layers the rest of them had on. He'd only put on the scarf because Kai and Ruka had insisted. Both of the women were also watching, but they were huddled by Shinjiro to snatch some of his warmth while the rest of them was covered in more layers than Hiroko. The bundles in their arms were the same way, allowing the newborns to stay nice and toasty in the cool evening air. Hiroko's eyes rise to Tanjiro. He's dressed traditionally with a veil over his face. The veil is currently set to the side of his face so he can talk with Gaara. Gaara holds Tanjiro close, the two huddled under Tanjiro's normal checkerboard haori to conserve heat as Tanjiro calmly converses with them. Hiroko knows that Tanjiro doesn't have the best health, so she's surprised that he's holding up so well in the snow. Actually, all of the slayers are holding up well enough. "Hiroko, try to breathe," Minato murmurs. She looks up in confusion, but as his brow furrows it clicks for her. He smiles at her and she lets his words guide her as she enters total concentration. Her limbs stop trembling with each even pull of air and she relaxes further when she realizes her body temperature is rising. Kyojiro grins but doesn't move. He clings to her hand and looks ahead. His father glances back to make sure he's okay before facing front again. The night is falling, the sun setting as Tanjiro steps into the center of an array of torches set up in a clearing near the estate. Naruto huddles next to Gaara and Tanjiro under the haori, his blue eyes gleaming as flakes of snow dust his cheeks and blonde hair. Mikomo huddles next to Urokodaki. She's bundled in his haori and her new one, breathing calmly as she watches. Is he about to start? A voice calls over Hiroko's shoulders and she glances behind her to see Hattori has arrived. Her eyes widen and she jerks around. Next to him are Masechika and the other boy, Hasehara, who both wave at her before settling their attention on the spectacle in front of them. "Yes. I believe now," Minato murmurs. Hattori taps Hiroko's cheek and she turns back to the spectacle as Tanjiro begins. All air rushes from her as she lets out a shocked sound. Awe thrums through those watching as Tanjiro begins dancing, performing moves she watches with apt attention. They remind her of something. Of her mother, dancing and showing her a set of forms her father had shown her. There's familiarity, and the similarities in the dances stand out to her. They border on identical at some points. Hiroko edges closer as the flames grow around Tanjiro. Kai smiles as Tanjiro dances. The area thrums with life and as the fire grows to the sky, warmth blankets them. Tanjiro's every movement brings warmth to the previously cold mountainside. "Amazing," Shinjiro murmurs as he watches. His eyes are wide as he takes in the movements of his newest friend. The way Tanjiro moves captures everyone's attention, so much so that they hardly notice the time passing by. Hiroko remains huddled against Minato, clutching Kyojiru's hand as the dance plays out. Brilliant images flicker over her eyes. She can almost see the haze of a dragon following Tanjiro's every move. It's gorgeous. It's amazing, and above all, it's mesmerizing. Kai and Ruka are the first to leave, the cold growing to be too much for the little bundles. The water breathers follow, but mostly because Giyu looks to be frozen stiff and the others don't want to leave him alone. Naruto turns in with Gaara and Tanjiro with the help of Minato. They are young enough that they can't quite stay up the full night. Minato returns after putting them to bed, leaving just Kyojiro and Hiroko of the kids besides Masechika and Hasehara. They move next to Shinjiro, Hattori staying behind the two kids while Minato resumes his position at Hiroko's side. The flickers of flames have yet to die down, and even though it's almost morning, Tanjiro shows no signs of stopping. It's only as the sun begins to rise that Tanjiro slows down. Hiroko and Kyojuro have had a few long nights when training for the final selection, but even so, they are struggling to stay awake as Tanjiro finishes his performance. Hattori and Shinjiro walk ahead to talk to Tanjiro, and Minato remains next to the two. He peers down at them. Kyojuro is still eyeing the flames, but he's starting to lean against Hiroko. Hiroko's eyes gleam, but she stifles her yawns against her scarf and her hand several times. "Come on, let's get you two to bed," Minato murmurs. Shinjiro comes over and Kyojuro gets hauled up onto his father's back. He finally lets go of Hiroko's hand as he gives in to sleep. Hiroko tries to get Minato to let her walk, but he hauls her up against him without trouble. "Just go to sleep, I've got you," Minato tells her. She sees his smile before she sinks into a peaceful slumber. "I'm surprised they managed to stay up this long." Hattori chuckles as he helps Tanjiro walk back to the estate. The man is breathing fine, but even after the display of his strength, the Hashira worry about him. Shinjiro nods, his brow furrowed as he glances back to Tanjiro. Minato notes his furrowed brows and makes a note to ask Shinjiro about it later as they come to the house. Ruka and Kai welcome them with warm tea and cider. The kids are bundled together in a pile by the hearth, absorbing the warmth of the wire under the covers. Minato chuckles and walks over to lay Hiroko down next to Mikomo. Shinjiro places Kyojuro next to her because there are hardly any other spots open in the pile of kids. Immediately Mikomo reaches out and takes hold of her friend in her slumber, almost instinctively. Kyojuro curls closer to the warmth and Minato covers them in another comforter. The adults and older teenagers settle around the table. Kai places a full plate of food in front of her husband and comes to sit next to him. Nezuko and Senjiro are sleeping in another room away from the murmuring voices. "That dance, where did you learn it?" Shinjiro asks as Tanjiro finished his meal. Tanjiro looks up and hums. "It's passed through my family lineage." The eldest performs the dance from sundown to sunup on New Year's Eve. "It's supposed to bring blessings from Hinokami, though at this point I do it purely for tradition." Shinjiro nods. Minato casts him a questioning glance and he sighs. "I ask because of its similarities to something else. My family is one of the oldest of the demon slayers. We have held records from back in the golden age of demon slaying, and in those records are the detailed recordings of the original breathing style, sun breathing. The existence of this breathing style is the main reason why flame breathing is so strictly named, so as not to be confused with the original style." Minato's eyes widen a fraction. He hadn't expected that. His eyes drift over to Tanjiro and he catches the wistful smile on the man's face. "My family has hidden from demons for a long time. I'm unsure of why, but ever since, even before my great-grandmother, we have kept ourselves secluded and hidden away from the public eye. We passed along the dance through our family to ensure it survived, but only my mother remembered the true purpose. She meant to tell me before she died, but she wasn't able to," Tanjiro informs them. Shinjiro sighs. "I believe that your dance may just be sun breathing, or at the very least a derivation of it. Too much of its style and appearance matches what I have read about. Along with that." Shinjiro looks up at Tanjiro, taking in his appearance. "Your features closely resemble what we know of the first breath user." Tanjiro raises a brow but nods, accepting the comment. "I suppose that would be alarming. I take it you were waiting to tell me about this until you had gathered all the facts?" he asks. Shinjiro nods. "I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Even so, I do believe that my conclusion is correct." Minato watches the exchange and hums. "That's interesting. So, the breathing styles were all derived from a singular one?" "I guess that makes sense. considering how easy it was for me to work similar styles together to create a more rounded form. Tanjiro, would you mind showing me more of the Hinokami Kagura another time so I can see how it could apply as a fighting style? He asks. Tanjiro nods. He gives Minato a soft smile. I would not mind showing you. Perhaps another day though, I feel like I will retire for now. He offers and rises to his feet. Kai helps him and the two excuse themselves and head to bed. Minato cups his chin in his hand and ponders everything. The gesture is a common one and it earns him a chuckle from Hitori as the boy nudges him out of his stupor. Minato turns his head over and gives a sheepish grin. Don't get too lost in your thoughts, Minato, you might not come out of them, Hitori teases. His eyes drift across the room to the pile of kids and he gestures at them as he turns his attention to his two students. What, you aren't going to join the pile? He asks Masechika and Hasehara. Masechika flushes but wanders over regardless while Hasehara sighs. The kid has dark hair though the tips are bleached yellow. He also has a few piercings along the sides of his ears where he's put in studs. Minato only ever saw items like that in his world, so he was surprised to find they were a thing. I'm fine to stay up. I don't need naps like the kids, Hasehara mutters. Hitori leans over and ruffles his hair, earning a squawk as the boy smacks his hand away. Kids need their rest, Hasehara, so how about you go join Masechika in the pile before I toss you to the kids? I'm sure Naruto and Kyojuro can pin you down, Hitori chides and smiles. Minato watches the exchange with an amused smile. Shinjiro is much the same. I'm only 3 years younger than you, old man, watch it. Hasehara gripes and stands to duck away from Hitori's hand. He grumbles but stalks over to the pile while casting a mutinous glare over his shoulder. The glare doesn't last. He softens considerably when Hiroko and Mikomo wake up and offer him a spot. Masechika chuckles from where Naruto has crawled onto his lap and pulled him under the covers with the rest of them. Hitori turns back to Minato and the other Hashira with a gentle smile on his features. It's the most relaxed they've seen him. He's polite to everyone but you. Reminds me of someone else at his age, Sakanji comments. Shinjiro chuckles as Hitori flushes red at the jab. He reaches for his tea to hide his embarrassment. I wasn't that bad, Hitori grimaces. Shinjiro shakes his head. No, you were worse. You kicked Jigoro in his shins when he called you pretty boy. He comments and glances over at Minato. Come to think of it, Minato did the same thing, he recalls with a fond smile. It seems like so long ago when in reality only a few months had passed since then. Minato takes a sip of his tea and doesn't deign the man with a response even when all eyes turn to him. Oh? Jigoro should know better than to judge a book by its cover at this point, Hitori says with a sharp and knowing smile. He toasts Minato and the shinobi echoes the move while Sakanji and Shinjiro watch on. The four sit and observe. The snow is falling faster again, the heat of the room keeping the cold outside at bay. It's a pleasant day and a good way to wrap up the hectic year behind them. Minato relaxes against the bench as he turns his attention to the pile of kids in the living room. Soon Kyojuro, Hiroko, and Mikomo will get their blades and will take on the roles of official trainers for their respective styles. Minato is well on his way to slaying enough demons to qualify as a Hashira, but honestly, he feels like one in all but name at this point. It's a pleasant start. Minato glances over to Hitori and the Wind Hashira casts him an easygoing smile. He lets himself smile back and enjoys the moment. The year starts with Hinokami Kagura but keeps going strong with Minato's birthday and the arrival of their Nichiren swords. He's off on a mission for the majority of it, but when he returns it's to all the kids huddled around a pile of gifts and sweets selected for him. Kai and Ruka take the yukata from the night he met Shinjiro and turn it into a haori for him to wear out on his missions. They painstakingly embroider the fabric to make it look like scales, and when he dons it, Naruto can't stop hollering about how cool he looks. Hitori was on a mission with him, so he stays long enough to give his well wishes before he's gone on another assignment. Minato spends the rest of his time with the kids enjoying good food and reading their notes. It's a wonderful time. He lets the time pass him by even though he has another mission the next day. Naruto sends him off with more sweets and a messy kiss on his cheek that causes Minato to smile for the rest of the day. Hiroko, Mikomo, and Kyojuro all wait for him to draw their swords. The tradition is explained to Minato when everyone gets excited and he doesn't understand the reason for it. After he's just as intrigued as before. Kyojuro's sword becomes a copy of his father's. The brilliant red hue shines in the morning light as he angles it to get a good look. Mikomo is next, her blade sporting swirling lines of deep and light blue that look like the ocean along the surface of her blade. Hiroko gets an interesting blade, colored yellow at the base and turning a deep burning red. White marks like lightning strikes crack over the surface as her eyes peer at it in glee. It's a beautiful piece for sure. Minato draws his not expecting much. His starts with blue at the hilt and burns into red at the tip. Flares of golden starbursts can be seen at the right angle of the blade, reminding Minato of fireworks. When not in the light, the golden hues are hidden in the red and blue sea, hiding the nature of the blade. Hitori tells him that the blade suits him. It captures his personality very well. Minato isn't quite sure what to think of that but takes it as a compliment. The days continue, passing them by like a flurry of snow. Minato finds missions that require 2 Hashira to be tedious. He has yet to meet a demon that requires 2 Hashira, but he's run into a few that have him either wishing for help or being grateful to have it. Shinjiro and Hitori are the ones he works with the most. His promotion to Hashira is on the horizon and they take time to teach him all they can about the position so he'll be ready when the time comes. This particular mission he's with Hitori. It's the beginning of the 3rd month of the year and the snow has stopped, if only to give way to rains that seem to never end. Hitori hates getting wet more than most and the two of them work to complete their mission quickly to avoid being more drenched than they need to be. The demon is slippery. Its blood art allows it to travel through shadows, causing more problems for the two of them than Minato would prefer when they just want to get the fight over with. It's not the strongest demon either. It just has the ability to slip away and stir the pot. It's not until Minato gets in a lucky shot against the demon and marks him that they can finally put an end to it. Hitori pushes a hand through his wet hair, pushing it over his head with a grimace. He wipes his blade clean and sheathes it before glancing at Minato. There's a wisteria house nearby. Care to stay with me before you jump back home? Hitori offers. Minato shrugs. He can feel his clothes clinging to his skin and he'd rather get a chance to dry off. Wisteria houses often have baths too, which would be nice before he returns home. That sounds like a good idea. He agrees and trails behind Hitori to head to the wisteria house. The rain is picking up and even demons would struggle in the downpour. Taking a break sounds like just the right idea. They make their way to the wisteria house and are greeted warmly when they arrive. The patron is a young woman with dark hair and eyes and her 2 sons. She gets them settled in and informs them about the baths around the back of the estate that are ready for them. They take her up on her offer, resulting in both slayers taking up residence in the warm waters as the rain patters outside. The baths are thankfully inside, otherwise they would have other problems. Hitori settles against the wall with a heavy sigh, allowing the warm water to cover the majority of his torso as he spreads his arms over the sides. Minato settles next to him and the two quietly enjoy the much-needed soaking. "So, are you going to get Hiroko anything for her birthday?" Hitori asks. His eyes open and gaze over at his companion. Minato blinks, tilting his head. "I hadn't really thought about it. When is her birthday anyway?" He wonders. If he has some time, then he can probably find her something unique. "Tomorrow," Hitori tells him and smirks as he enjoys the way Minato jerks. The blonde's eyes are wide in shock and he stares at Hitori to make sure he's not pulling his leg. That's not enough time. He calls, an edge of whine in his tone as Minato raises his hand to his chin. Why didn't anyone mention anything? He knows a few of the birthdays of the kids like Kyojuro and Mikomo, but he had spaced Hiroko between the final selection and her training with Jigoro. Hitori shakes his head with a wistful smile. She doesn't like to mention things like that. I only know because Jigoro asked me for ideas, as though he hasn't raised the girl. Then again, Hitori comments and eyes Minato. I'm honestly waiting for you to announce that you are formally adopting her. Hell, I'll eat my own Haori if you don't name her your Sugako when you claim your Hashira title. Minato flushes, rubbing the back of his head. The idea isn't an unwelcome one or one he hasn't had before. Part of him has wanted to ask Hiroko about it, but well, he doesn't want to come on too strong. Regardless, she's one of his kids and nothing will change that. Hitori hums and raises a hand to run through his hair. It slips down his side in long strands of silky blue. How about you get her some silks? She was telling me that she misses all the colorful silks she grew up around. Maybe you can find some neat colors for her. Or a set of senbon, though those aren't as useful as a demon slayer. Hitori murmurs, changing the subject to let Minato think over the other topic. The shinobi sighs and groans, tilting his head back as he ponders his options. He would like to get Hiroko something nice, something unique for her birthday. Even so, Hitori's idea isn't without merit. Part of Minato pauses and he thinks about something that Kushina had shown him. Chakra-infused fabric, woven carefully into a top that served as reinforced armor. His mind was working quickly. If he could infuse chakra into silk, then he might be able to make a practical and pretty gift. His eyes flicker and he rises in the water to walk over to his belongings. Hitori makes a noise of surprise, but Minato is rifling through his things to pull out his coat. The one time the kids don't have it with them, making it easy for him to test his theory. He tugs at the fabric to test it and right before it breaks, he begins siphoning his chakra through it. It holds but the chakra slips away. His brow furrows and he ponders a few seals before carefully imprinting them with his chakra. Picturing seals in your mind's eye isn't the best way to lay them out because humans are flawed creatures and drawing them out helps to mitigate the penchant for human error. Even so, Minato has practice and this is a simple seal that he's created enough times that he trusts himself to overlay it on the fabric. You have that look on your face again. What has you so focused on this time? Hitori comments as he comes around to Minato's side. Chakra-enforced fabric. There were some clans, including my wife's, who used it for armor and clothing. They would saturate the threads with chakra for years, but I'm curious if I can get a similar effect by using seals. Minato offers and trails off as he links a few more seals over the fabric of his cloak. The seals interlock, forming a twisting array of black against the white fabric. He tests it again and grins when the fabric bends but doesn't give. He wants to test more. You lost me at seals, but I suppose I can understand where your end goal is. Turn silk scarves into something useful in combat for little Hiroko, so you can give her a unique and practical gift? Hattori offers and his eyes twinkle with mirth when Minato catches his gaze. Minato nods and Hattori shakes his head with a fond smile. Only you. Don't stay up too late pondering it. Her birthday is tomorrow, but I'm sure she wouldn't mind if the gift was late. Hattori calls and rises from the water. He heads to go get dressed and Minato refocuses on his task at hand. Perhaps he should also get dressed and head to the room for food before he dives even further into the idea. Minato rises and gets dressed, gathering his things and heading to the room provided for him and Hattori. The storm rages outside and rain hits the shutters of the windows in the halls. He enters the room to find Hattori inside drying off his hair. Hattori waves him over and informs him that food will arrive shortly before he begins writing up his report. Minato nods and settles on his offered futon to fiddle with his idea more. He had seen similar structures before with Kushina's things, but he had never tried to do it himself. He finds that the application is simple enough, but he wonders about the lasting effect on something as delicate as silk. He'll need to pick some up to test his theory before he gives them to Hiroko. He's concentrated as he works, completely missing the food when it's brought in until Hattori snaps his fingers between Minato's eyes. Minato jerks his head up and gives a sheepish smile before joining Hattori in eating. As they eat, Minato ponders the topic of birthdays and begins to wonder. Hattori, when is your birthday? Minato asks as he takes a bite of tempura. It's perfectly cooked and melts in his mouth. Not quite as good as Ruka's cooking even so, but Minato finds it enjoyable. Hattori hums and swallows his bite of food. It was the second day of the 12th month, why? He asks. Minato stills. He then jabs his chopsticks at Hattori accusingly. You didn't tell me. How am I supposed to celebrate with the rest of you if none of you tell me? Minato mutters, pouting at his friend. Hattori stifles a laugh. Sorry, I kind of forgot about it, to be honest. We normally celebrate together on New Year's, but demon slayers have a penchant for forgetting days like those. Next year you can do something if you feel so inclined, he offers with a smile. Minato huffs. So, you are 19 now? Makes me feel a little old, Minato says and smiles. Hattori shakes his head, but he has a fond smile as they continue to eat. Well, a gift for Hattori is in order too now. Minato will also have to ask for everyone else's birthdays so he doesn't miss another one. Kyojiru's is coming up, but Minato already has plans for that. You missed Gyu's too. His was sometime at the beginning of the second month, Hattori tells him. Minato huffs. He really needs a calendar. They eat together and Minato jabs at Hattori to try and figure out what type of gift he wants. The damned Hashira just laughs and circumvents the question. Minato vows to get him the best gift he can, part of Kushina's nature rubbing off on him the more he thinks about it. Hiroko enjoys her birthday gift. The silk scarf turns out to work as intended, forming a layer of armor when charged with chakra, and when they test it out it withstands even a Nichiren katana. Minato puts the same seals on Hattori's haori with a grin. It's a good late birthday gift, he thinks, even if Hattori only shakes his head fondly and thanks him. Kyojiru's birthday comes soon after and Minato gifts the boy a set of explosive seals. Kyojiru's eyes are wide with glee at the prospect of getting to use them and the secret set of smoke tags that Naruto snuck in there. Minato foresees many pranks in the future, but it all brings a smile to his face. The kids are having fun, so he is too. More months pass by. Minato spoils the kids as much as he can between missions, and he finds himself on more and more assignments with just himself. He takes to enjoying the assignments with the Hashira more and more because sometimes he gets caught in his thoughts when it's just him on the hunt. He also keeps a lookout. He's constantly searching for more flickers of Biju chakra around him, traces of the other Jinchuriki in the world. He doesn't catch anymore for some time, but he does come close. It happens not when he's on a mission, but rather when he's shopping with Tanjiro for Sabito's birthday gift. It's the 5th month of the year and there is a warmth settling as the rains give way to a pleasant spring. Minato rifles through their parcels. He has a good amount of packages stacked on one arm while the other is searching for a specific article so he can seal it away before the rest. Tanjiro chuckles next to him from where he's situated in the corner of the shop they had stopped inside. Need some help? Tanjiro asks and reaches out to take some of the parcels. Minato thanks him with a smile and finally locates the item. It's a hair care set that Hiroko had mentioned seeing the last time they were in Asakusa. She had mentioned it more as a joke gift, but Minato had thought it was both practical and funny for Sabito, so he grabbed it regardless. Sealing the item away, Minato took one quick glance around the shop before stowing a few more of their parcels into his seals. He didn't want to freak anyone out, but they were getting ahead of themselves and had a lot of purchases. Tanjiro had come along on the stipulation that Kai wanted some more fabric to make Nezuko and Gaara some clothes, but he had quickly been roped into shopping for more when Minato spotted interesting things. Asakusa was a whirlwind and it reminded Minato of Konoha a fair amount. Electricity kept the city alive even when night fell. Wonderful smells wafted by and Minato grabbed food for them to take back home when they finished up. His eyes caught different trinkets and the varying styles of clothing and people in the area. Westernization was the term he gathered from those present, but honestly, it just looked more like home than anywhere else to Minato. There was still an edge of the traditional Japanese attire, meshed into the crowds of people dressed in more familiar clothing. Minato took stock of it all. He almost felt like a kid in a candy store. Tanjiro helped ground him, but the man was enjoying his enthusiasm just as much. I just need to grab some more fabric and then we can head back. Do you want to help me find something for Nezuko? Tanjiro asks as they walk past an array of fabric. Minato nods and they both pore over the soft fabrics with whimsical prints. It reminds Minato of when he met Shinjiro all those months ago. His smile brightens and he points out an interesting fabric with printed bunnies along the surface. Tanjiro grabs it and some red and green fabrics for yukatas that Kai wants to make for the kids. Normally the Kamados didn't have the money for things like this. They survived well enough from the funds they made as charcoal sellers prior to meeting Minato and the Rengokus, but upon moving into the Rengoku household they were given a stipend by the Demon Slayer Corps for maintaining the residence. The master insisted, leaving Tanjiro with quite a bit of money that he wasn't sure what to do with. He chose to spend it on his kids and his wife, spoiling them more often than he did before. Minato hums and grabs an orange fabric too when he spots it. There's not much, but if he asks he's sure Kai or Ruka can do something with it for Naruto. They pay for their articles and Minato seals away the rest of the items after they duck into an alley. When they emerge, Minato heads to grab the food he promised the kids, letting Tanjiro wait for him outside. The city is alive, filled with enough people to make a normal person's head spin. It all fills Minato with so much happiness. When Minato returns with the food he has to pause. Something edges on his senses, something different. He looks around and Tanjiro notices his distraction. Minato? Tanjiro asks and sets a hand on his shoulder. Minato turns to him and shakes the feeling off. It's gone now, but something settles in him. He's not sure why, but he has a feeling he needs to get home. Ah, nothing. Let's head back, he says with a feigned smile. Tanjiro nods and they flicker away. The 7th month brings foreboding news. The master passes away in his sleep and leaves Kaguya to be named his successor. Minato watches as he steps up to be named the master with a gentle smile even as pain writes itself over his features. The next final selection is close at hand and Kaguya makes Minato the Storm Hashira in time for the new workings to be implemented. A Hashira will oversee the final selection. Any students that are rescued are re-evaluated and either sent back for more training or offered other options. Over a dozen students pass this time around and no child dies. Minato smiles. It's a good change, even amidst the sadness from the master's passing. He meets Hiroko, Kyojuro, and Mikomo at the master's mansion as they visit the grave of the boy that died in their final selection. Their year mark is halfway there. Minato trusts their skills more now than ever. They are growing in front of his eyes and part of him can't help but wish they would stop just so he can enjoy the moments with them a little longer. Other parts of him can't help but be proud. Snow begins to fall again. Minato settles in for his first year with the Demon Slayers and finds that he can't quite believe how long it's been. It feels like no time has passed at all. It feels like there was all the time in the world between then and now. The new year brings around more changes. Naruto has started his Demon Slayer training in earnest and Minato names Hiroko his Sugako. The world pushes on and Minato watches Tanjiro dance from sunset to sunrise, willing in the new year with new blessings. There are still a few more years until Giyu, Sabito, and Naruto will enter the final selection. The kids are now full-fledged slayers and taking their own missions with the Hashira they serve. Senjuro and Nezuko are walking now and Tanjiro can't stop talking. Kai is pregnant again. Minato teases Tanjiro relentlessly but the man takes the jabs in stride. Gaara grows more excited at the prospect of other little siblings even as Tanjiro and Nezuko trail behind him wherever he goes. Gaara starts to learn Hinokami Kagura. He works with Minato to decipher and turn the dance into a combat form while perfecting his chakra control. Gaara sets his goal to become a demon slayer and protect not just his family but others too. Minato watches the kids grow up. They are growing so fast that he almost can't keep track but he's incredibly proud to watch their progress. The new year trails into Hattori's 20th birthday. Minato holds to his promise and manages to gift Hattori with a set of seals that the man can use with his growing reserves. They go on more missions together. Minato wonders where the time goes. Then again, there are points where time slows. There are points where his breath catches in his throat. Most of the time they are soft and gentle moments that fill him with warmth. Other times they fill him with terror. On one rain-filled night, terror rushes through him more than anything else. It starts with Hattori and his students on a mission. It ends with a freshly dug grave and dread settled in the pits of Minato's stomach. They can't save everyone, no matter how hard they try. Drabbled terror. He hadn't wanted to think that the sight was true. He had been observing the city at night. He didn't expect to run into anything of note. It caught his sight though. Golden hair catching the lights of the city under its haze. They were strong, he noted. They held themselves well and they wore a demon slayer uniform. He sneered at the implication. A slayer and a strong one. Perhaps it was the rumored Hashira that was making waves among the weaker demons. He would make a strong demon. He debated grabbing the man to turn him. He was just about to approach when the man's friend caught his gaze. He froze in shock. Terror rushed through him like nothing else. Burning red eyes, red hair darker than blood. Ears donned with Hanafuda earrings. Those earrings. Those damned earrings that no one should have. He wanted to rip into the two. He wanted to flee. He couldn't stay. He had to get away. He had to run. Except that man had those earrings. He couldn't allow that. A snarl worked over his lips through the panic and he called for his strongest. He needed someone to hunt that man down. He needed him to die. No one should have those earrings. No one. Drabble healing. He isn't sure how, but he ends up staying the night. And another, and another. Maybe it's because she's always smiling gently, maybe it's because despite the other one's hatred the other one likes how useful he can be. She's soft. Gentle, her words kind despite what she is. He finds that he can relax around her. She likes his skill and treats him well. She plays with his dark hair when he lets her and dresses him in soft colors. She teaches him how to care for himself and others. She shows him how to patch a wound. She cries when he gets injured but he just smiles and shows her that despite the enemy's best efforts, he won't die easily. She asks to study him after that, much to the annoyance of the other one. He doesn't mind. He lets her, hoping that somehow, someway, his curse can help her. He shows her his other skills too. She finds the notion of elemental abilities intriguing. She loves his bubbles more than anything. The voice in his head likes her too. It's soft and gentle just like her and maybe it's growing on him. He doesn't mind listening now that he understands. He likes it here. Outside the home it's noisy and odd and not familiar, but inside, well, he feels like he finally found a place to call his home. Even if he is scared and worried about losing himself again with someone so gentle nearby, he stays. Neither he nor the best inside has known love for a long time. They can't help but want it, crave it. They can't help but stay. The other one hates it but puts him to work regardless. Chapter 24. Dancing with Fire and Death. Hasehara, you are not going out in the rain with just your uniform. Hiroko snaps, reaching out to shove the boy down as she tries to wrestle a Haori over his shoulders. Minato chuckles next to his rowdy Sugako. Sometimes he wonders where the shy girl he first met a year and a half ago went. Other times he sees Hiroko standing next to Naruto and Kyojuro and recognizes that she's simply grown to adapt to her surroundings. Oi, I'm fine. I can handle a little bit of water. Hasehara freezes and then swats Hiroko when she tugs at his hair. His face flushes darkly as she presses closer. Watch it. He snaps but it's all good fun as Hiroko scowls at him and he scowls back. His lips twitch and Hiroko's scowl deepens as Hasehara finally lets her tug the Haori over him. Hasehara, are you causing trouble for Hiroko-chan? A teasing voice calls from the sidelines and Minato turns to see Hattori walking over with Masechika in tow. The teenager flashes Minato a greeting while Hattori walks over to the squabbling students. Hiroko bounces over to Hattori, eyes flickering brightly as she grins at the Hashira. Hattori fondly ruffles her hair and reaches out to flick Hasehara on his forehead. The boy dodges the move and grumbles. He slips around Hiroko's side and tugs the Haori closer. Despite his earlier gripes, now that Hiroko got the fabric on him, he won't remove it. Don't go taking sides, old man, Hasehara snaps. He turns and stalks over to Masechika as his cheeks burn. Minato watches the exchange fondly. He and Hiroko had run into the Wind Hashira and his students by chance while they were recovering from their last mission. The demon hadn't hurt them or anything, but he had a blood art that increased his speed and forced Hiroko and Minato to stay up all night chasing him down. Hiroko was understandably exhausted and they had a few more missions, so Minato had located a nearby wisteria house just as the rain began to pour. Hattori and his students had arrived not long after, one of their missions leading them to the area. After they completed it, they had chosen to rest at the wisteria house before heading out on their next assignment. Hiroko had nearly lost it when she saw Hasehara out in the rain in just his modified Slayer uniform. She had promptly unsealed one of her spare haori to shove on the boy even at his polite protests. When she continued and even started to manhandle him, he had picked up volume. Minato had seen similar events happen between Kyojuro and the girl, so he didn't expect Hasehara to be successful in throwing her off. He was right. Don't mind Hasehara Hiroko-chan. He's just grumpy because Masechika got the kill before he could, Hattori comments as he sits next to the girl. Hiroko giggles and nods. I know. Hasehara-kun is just prickly, she says teasingly and glances over her shoulder at said boy. He frowns but doesn't rise to the challenge, pointedly ignoring them both. Minato shakes his head. That will only antagonize the two more. He hums and takes pity on the boy, walking over to distract his student and Hattori. The patron told me that food is ready and we can go eat any time. Are you up for it? Minato asks with a smile. Hattori meets his gaze and his eyes twinkle knowingly. Hiroko rises to her feet and nods. That sounds good, she comments and skips over to Masechika and Hasehara to grab them for food. The older boys nod and follow along with the blonde to acquire the mentioned food. Hattori files next to Minato and they trail after their students. The rain is picking up outside but Minato doesn't pay it much mind. He's had experience in the monsoon season at this point and he knows that the storm will let up eventually. They all settle in to eat, Hiroko teasing the boys as Hasehara gets a hold of himself. They are growing quite quickly. I'm a little surprised that Hasehara is going to be 18 soon. I feel like it was just yesterday that my brother and I took him in, Hattori murmurs and watches the three fondly. Minato nods. I sometimes forget that Hiroko isn't 10 years old, learning how to use chakra for the first time. She reminds me well enough but time just seems to pass by. The two exchanged bemused grins. They both sound like old ladies but it's a common occurrence. Out of all the adults, Minato and Hattori just mesh the best. Tanjiro and Shinjiro aren't far behind but Minato has come to enjoy the Wind Hashira's company. They have gone on several missions together but they aren't as often as before. Minato almost misses it. He understands that as Hashira the two of them have other duties and their skill sets are needed in other areas, but he can't help but think back to the last night he was tucked away in a wisteria house with Hattori like this. It's a nice feeling to have a brother in arms again. Minato hasn't had that since Fugaku and that hadn't ended well. It makes me wonder how others are doing, Minato murmurs softly. The thoughts of Fugaku make him think about Konoha and those inside of it. He has no way of knowing if they are okay but he hopes that they are. Kakashi would be turning 22 this year. It was an odd thing to think about. The village you left behind? Hattori asks him. Minato nods. He smiles wistfully and continues speaking. Hattori isn't quite prodding but the man has yet to look away, telling enough about his curiosity on the matter. One of my students to be exact. He'd be turning 22 at the end of this year. I hadn't really thought about how much time it's been since I've seen him. Close to 3 years now, Minato recalls and chuckles. I hope he's taking care of himself. Kakashi never really got the hang of letting his burdens go and choosing to just live in the moment. He was a smart kid, smarter than most double his age but sometimes that doesn't amount to enough, Minato murmurs and shakes his head. Hattori hums and takes a bite of his food, chewing thoughtfully. His eyes settle on Hiroko and he notices that the girl is watching them carefully, her eyes drawn to Minato in particular. She comes over and sits next to the man, reaching out to grab his arm as she grins at him. "Sounds like he was a handful," she comments. Minato raises a brow, noticing that she was eavesdropping but having nothing more than a small smile over it. "He was. A bit like you, honestly. Well, I supposed you were a lot like him in some ways." Minato reaches over and tucks Hiroko against his side. He smiles at her and she flushes at the attention even as her smile widens. Hattori watches the sight fondly. He recalls the last time they were in a house like this and how he made the comment to Minato about adopting the girl. Hiroko looks every bit like his daughter, even without Naruto glued to her side. He treats her just the same. Hattori wonders if he can finally get Minato to just officiate what everyone already thinks. Kakashi learned to be fiercely protective of his teammates, to the point where he would put them above the mission. He cared deeply for his teammates and those in his village, Minato recalls fondly as he taps his chin. He's trying not to think about Obito either, but it's hard to think about Kakashi without Obito trailing behind. Especially when one talks about Kakashi's changed outlook. Obito is still a sore subject for him. Minato has no way of knowing whether or not the man is alive now, but he still remembers the way that Obito threatened Konoha. He shakes his head and hums again. He was also skilled with lightning chakra, even if he learned how to utilize all 5 elements of chakra. He summoned dogs too, one he named Pakun whom Naruto met briefly. Minato continues to recall as he steers away from the harder topics. Hiroko hums. "He sounds really strong," she murmurs, her eyes shifting over empty space. He was also the favorite target of Kushina's pranks because of his stoic nature. He opened up the older he got. Kushina kind of forced him to. Enough that the next time she dyed his silver hair pink he just sighed and lived with it. The shinobi says and chuckles at the reminder. Kakashi had learned to live with Kushina's pranks. He was her favorite target and even though he got better at avoiding her he never was truly unscathed. Hiroko giggles again. "Silver hair? More of an old man than you then?" She teases. Minato huffs and ruffles her hair as he tickles her sides. He looks more like a dad than the famed Storm Hashira at that moment. The others watch with smiles and Hiroko squirms as she tries to escape, laughter bubbling from her lips. Hattori chuckles and goes back to finishing his food and turns in for the night. There are missions tomorrow but warmth draws him to rest in the calm embrace of friends. Laughter echoes throughout the estate, both Hiroko's and Minato's. He sleeps well. When they wake Hattori bids the storm breathers farewell and a promise to drop by the Rengoku estate for Hiroko's birthday. The girl flushes at the reminder but thanks Hattori with a smile. Hasehara bids the two a calm goodbye even as Hiroko tugs her haori further around his shoulders. Masechika just smiles and waves them off. They have a mission to get to a few miles away. Hattori thinks about the details and part of him worries about the specifics. Multiple disappearances. Burn marks throughout a village and several caravans of missing people. Previous slayers with plenty of experience who never reported back. He worries. He also trusts in the skills of his students and in himself. He doesn't squander his free time and he's been training with Minato every chance he gets to improve his chakra along with his skills as a demon slayer. He doesn't quite have the hang of healing the same way Hiroko does but he can manage small wounds. He can walk along surfaces including water and he can use the tags that Minato supplies him with. He trusts his skills. He's also not cocky. Strong demons exist, the 12 Kazuki exist. He wants to hope that this demon isn't one, but all signs point to a particularly strong demon and a possible lower moon. Shisho? Masechika calls and Hattori smiles as he waves off his concern. He tells his students to stay on guard and guides them to their destination. The day passes quickly and they make good time. They arrive in the evening to see the village laid before them. It's worrying to Hattori that it's so desolate. The village is silent and the only sign of life is the burn marks dotting the houses. Masechika and Hasehara are up in arms immediately and they draw their weapons even as Hattori gestures for them to file behind him. He makes his way through the village that sent the request for help. The sender of the message had told them a dozen people were left after the attacks. Hattori fears that the number is abysmal or non-existent now. They search the houses and only find more burn marks. Dread settles in Hattori's gut the further they walk. The shadows of the evening trail after them and give everything a foreboding glow. Hattori feels something settle in his stomach. He tells the others to keep their eyes open and pulses his chakra. He's still learning to sense demons the same way Minato does. His instincts are finely honed after years of fighting demons, but they are especially sharp after training with Minato. A flicker of something dark on the edge of his senses. A rush of heat at the base of his neck. Hattori twists around and brings his blade up and draws a torrent of wind behind him. He darts past the shocked faces of his students in time to block a wall of fire that sparks to life right where Masechika had been. The first form of wind breathing works to dispel the flames as gleaming red eyes make themselves known to Hattori from the woods. A smirk works over the demon's features and she chuckles. "Well, you must be a Hashira," she says and her eyes burn brightly. They are a brilliant and solid red and they gaze straight at Hattori. She flickers away as Hattori lunges for her. He's quick but she's just as fast. He twists and brings his blade up to bear as fire swells and crashes above him. Masechika shouts for him but he ends up fighting his own blaze as the fire cuts between the three and separates the slayers. Hattori keeps his senses on edge, scanning his surroundings for the elusive demon. The smell of metal rises in the air and he hears her let out a heady sigh. He turns his head to see her sitting on the edge of a house, her eyes watching him carefully. Her skin is a deep black with cracked markings rising over her bust and stomach in glowing arcs. It's almost as though she's a living elemental from legend. She licks her black lips as she catches his gaze again. "You're strong. Fast too, I'm going to enjoy this fight." The demon teases and then she's upon him. Her strikes are quick and Hattori parries her blows even as fire works over his side and singes his clothing. He backs up further and pushes her back using his second form. The multiple strikes keep her at bay long enough for him to enter his seventh form and take to the air. The demon flickers, bursting into flames. Hattori's breath catches in his throat as she appears further along in another rush of flames. Not good, definitely not good. He grimaces and twists his blade as he searches for his two students. He finds, to his horror, that they are fighting towering elemental masses. Burning heaps of human-shaped flesh given life as they lunge for the vital areas of their targets. His eyes twist sharply to the demoness and she lets out another laugh. "Come now, show me what a Hashira is made of. What's your name, Hashira? What's your name so I can savor it as I devour you?" She draws out, a sick pleasure entering her voice. Hattori swallows bile. "Say Hattori." He offers even though he wants nothing less than to hear this monster say his name. He flinches when she speaks, letting his name drip from her coal-laden lips. "Hattori, how pretty. I can't wait to devour you, Hattori." she taunts and then lunges again. Her claws bear down on his sword when he brings it up to block. He gets a better view of her eyes and almost curses. There, shifting along her right eye is the kanji for 2. Hattori flashes into the 6th form to get some distance and flames trail his wind, building. Smoke is rising into the air and he feels his lungs burning from more than strain. He gets flashes of Masechika and Hasehara standing back to back as they face their elemental targets. It settles the nerves to see the two working together. They know how to back one another up so Hattori can focus on the other problem at hand. Demon Blood Art, Fireball. The demon whirls fire around her arms, launching blasts of the element in his direction. He dodges what he can and dissipates the rest. Part of him wishes he had Minato there so the man could fire off his water jutsu. Minato isn't there though, and Hattori isn't sure he wants to call the man into this mess unless he has to. He dives under another blow and rises into the air. It's growing warmer and the village is ablaze around him as he twists around in the air. 9th form, Ideiden Typhoon. He calls as the powerful gusts send the sparks of flames away from him. His blade cuts through the demon's neck and she cries out as the markings along her body burn hotly. Demon Blood Art, Phoenix Flare. She bursts into flames again. When she comes back she has no trace of the wounds he just dealt her or the near beheading she suffered. A flare of desperation as she lunges at him. He sidesteps and his blade drags over her neck. Her eyes shift to his and he sees momentary panic before she smirks. She dissolves into flames again with the same murmur of a blood art and he lets out a sharp and annoyed growl. She's playing with him, toying with his actions, and letting him get close when in reality she can keep flickering away. There has to be a pattern to her actions, a way to stop her. She's not immune to being beheaded or she wouldn't bother turning into flames whenever he gets a hit in. Hattori ponders and works his head around the problem even as he backs further and further away from his students. The smoke is heavier now. His eyes burn from the amount flooding the area and he quickly drags his haori up and ties it over his mouth to block out the worst of it. His lungs continue to burn while his eyes tear. She comes at him again. More flames, more burning. The heat is almost unbearable around him. The other slayers didn't last this long. They sounded so nice while they screamed, burning alive under my power. You though, you are strong. I desperately want to know what you taste like. The demon calls from behind and Hattori uses 4th form to throw her off her feet. She leaps onto a nearby building consumed by her flames. The haze is growing into the air and giving way to more smoke. Fury edges over Hattori's thoughts. He lunges and the demon makes a surprised noise as he ignores the fire and slices her neck again. He almost goes through completely when she erupts into flames. He turns on her even as she reappears, growing used to her pattern. He's getting better at sensing her but that means nothing when he has to keep avoiding the fire consuming the village. It means nothing when his chest aches and he struggles to keep his eyes open. You are fast. She calls in surprise and avoids his next blow by diving to the side. Her arm isn't so lucky and Hattori relishes the scream she gives as he cuts cleanly through it. He targets the rest of her as she tries to back away. He pushes her away from the flames and takes a sharp breath as he calls on a bit of chakra. He lunges ahead and the wind flickers under his feet as he slices across her chest, bringing another strike over her other arm and the final across her leg. The demon screams and the limbs fall away. They erupt into fire again. Hattori isn't far behind. He focuses. There. The fire is burning over the limbs and where they are healing over. The demon took longer to reappear this time, showing that even if progress is slow it's still there. Hitori focuses on tearing the demon apart. The heat grows stuffy and almost unbearable and his fingers burn from where the Tsuba brushes them. It's too hot against his skin, bringing more searing pain, but his focus is on the damned demon that he's facing. She backs off and he goes after her. She's running now, fear in her eyes. He presses in and slices through her arm again. She jerks back in shock as he tackles her through the flames roaring around them. First form modified to something physical. Wind whipping around them both in a torrent that dispels the flames as Hitori slides his katana over her neck. She erupts into flames with a frustrated shout. When she appears, he jerks to her new position and finds her eyes glaring at him. That's enough. She screams. Her hands slam together and the fire begins to draw into her. Panic rushes through Hitori and his eyes dart to his students. They are focused on their fight, not on the demon who's gathering a massive amount of her flames together in a tight ball. Hitori jolts and he flickers across the field in time to tackle Masechika and Hasehara behind a wall as she screams. Demon blood art, supernova. Quote. The flames make a cracking sound and then the unbearable heat flares out. Hitori covers both his students with his haori and channels chakra into the fabric like Minato showed him. It stiffens and fights the heat that cascades over them as the world goes red. Minato feels unsettled. He and Hiroko just finished their mission and are getting ready to return. He looks up at the sky, his chest tightening subconsciously. He feels like something wrong is going to happen. His gaze drifts in the opposite direction that he walked and he wonders about Hitori. The man had been called specifically to deal with a demon matter. He wasn't just on patrol but rather on a mission where a suspected high-level demon was present. Minato bites his lip. He doesn't like these feelings. The last time he had one this bad was the night he and Naruto were first attacked by demons. There's a burst of red in the distance. It's several miles off and it flickers out fast enough that if Minato hadn't been looking, he wouldn't have seen it. Dread settles in his stomach. He swallows a lump and jerks around to Hiroko. Hiroko, we need to go. He starts, and then from the same direction the burning haze grows. He slowly turns his head and his mouth feels dry at the explosion that he just witnessed. He has to get over there. What are the chances that Hitori isn't there, mixed up in whatever the hell that was? Hitori's breaths come out sharply. He's still holding total concentration but the ash and smoke make it difficult to not wince in pain. He holds Masechika at his side and Hasehara has his blade drawn next to him. The boy tore out his piercings when the heat grew to be too much, his eyes drawn to the burning figure of a demon ahead of them. Hitori's only ever felt heat like this fighting with Shinjiro. Even then that heat was a comforting warmth compared to this all-consuming haze around him. The air felt stale along with the glass-like shards breaking through the air. This isn't good, Hasehara calls. He's a step away from leaping out of the way if their demon comes after them. Hitori wants nothing more than for his students to run as he rises to his full height. No, it's not. Masechika, do you have one of Minato's kunai? Hitori demands and watches as the demon regains herself and grins at them menacingly. Her eyes are gleaming in the light of the fire raging in the area. It's not looking good for them. Hitori is faster than her and more skilled than she is. The problem is her blood art that she abuses to keep him from truly beheading her. If Hitori was a fraction faster he might have been able to cut her neck off fast enough but he wasn't. Masechika draws the kunai and lets out a sharp cry as he drops it. The metal is searing hot and even their katanas hum with the ambient warmth. Hasehara lets out a sound and grabs the kunai with Hiroko's spare haori, tossing it across the field with a pulse of chakra. He tosses the kunai and Hattori pays too little attention to his student and too much on the kunai sailing through the air. If he had been watching more closely, he might have been able to save Hasehara. It plays out in slow motion as he sees the demon move. Hattori shifts over and reaches out as a flicker appears behind the boy, but he doesn't get there fast enough. Hasehara jerks, but his eyes go wide as an arm skewers him through the chest. Vicious satisfaction crosses the demon's face and then she leans down to kiss his cheek. Blood is pooling around her hand and down Hasehara's lips as she shakes. He's staring down at the hand in his chest in shock. Demon blood art, elemental incarnation. She murmurs before flickering into flames when Hattori cuts across her head. He whirls on his student next but goes still as the fire-laden arm in Hasehara's chest suddenly burns brighter, the fire spreading over his body. Hasehara manages to look up at Hattori as blood spills from his lips. His eyes are wide with fear. Hattori lets out a cry and Hasehara barely manages a scream before the flames consume him completely. He goes up in a vibrant blaze of red and yellow. Terror and a horrible realization settle as Hasehara's body burns, becoming nothing more than one of the figures he and Masechika had previously faced. Hasehara. Masechika shouts in terror and Hattori jerks back as the newly formed elemental lays into them. A flicker across the field. A twist, launching into the air before the figure lashes out. The strike is not with a blade but rather a kick that sends the elemental flying across the field. Hattori jerks his head over to the demon as rage rushes through him. The demon is laughing, bowed forward as she cackles at them gleefully. She jerks and a blade sinks into her neck before she erupts into flames with her blood art again. Minato stands where she was, murderous intent in his eyes with his blade drawn across the air where the demon had just been. He grits his teeth and flashes through hand signs. Water style, exploding water shockwave. Minato calls. The area gets flooded. Water pours from Minato's lips in heavy torrents and the ground quakes under the waves that cover and explode across the fire-laden ghost town. The water sizzles as it contacts any superheated metal in the area, cooling it down as parts bubble with heat. The demon screams when the water floods up against her legs and sends her sprawling. Fire covers behind them, crawling over the elemental and overtaking Hasehara's body. The elemental lets out a hollow noise of pain as the water douses its skin. Parts of the hot blackened face crack open and Hattori sees a glimmer of human skin underneath. Hiroko, Masechika, grab Hasehara and get out of here. Hattori orders and then lunges after Minato. He's pushing against the Kazuki, shutting her fire down with water techniques that flood the field in ways that Hattori didn't think possible. He's never watched Minato fight quite like this. The man is utilizing breathing techniques in tandem with his chakra, pressing through the water and dragging it up and over the demon. It proves to be just what the demon needs as Hattori sees her flames flicker. She tries to burst into flames but only goes halfway lit, healing over one arm that was cut but not the other. Panic rises over her features. Vicious satisfaction swells in Hattori and he rushes her with the intent to tear her apart. She still uses flames, trying to drag them up and around them. She catches Hattori's sides in his arms, burning the skin and bringing more pain to the surface. Minato is quick to combat her by spraying more water her way. Keep up the water. Hattori orders. Minato nods out of the corner of his eye and brings his fingers up. Water style, water binding. He calls and the water rises in ropes that grab the demon. Hattori sees his opening and darts ahead. He pushes himself to go faster, the image of Haseharu's scared face in his mind's eye even as he brings his blade up and screams. His vision blurs. Everything burns. His arms, his neck, his lungs. He slices through her head and rounds on her just in case. No flames. She screams and curses them, her body disintegrating into ash. Hattori shudders and his breathing goes uneven. His vision blurs and then doubles. The sounds are all too much and he falls forward. Minato calls for him but he can't stay conscious long enough to call back. Hiroko feels her throat in her chest. Water washes over Haseharu's form, his face covered in a layer of hardened rock that cracks and gives way below the waves. Masakika crouches next to her, trying to get Haseharu to focus. They had rounded on the boy immediately after Hattori shouted at them. Masakika had told her what happened and terror gripped Hiroko at the thought. She immediately pinned the boy in the water but she didn't need to do much when the demon was quelled by Minato and Hattori. Now she has other problems. They both do. Masakika is frantic at her side as she pulls on her chakra. Panic rises in her chest. She's looking at the boy she was teasing just a day ago and she can feel tears spilling down her cheeks. He has a hole in his chest. A huge gaping hole. Her hands cover the hole and she channels her chakra. She has no idea how to fix this, how to patch up this wound. Haseharu coughs, his lips burned and chapped. He reaches out with one mangled and horribly burned hand. She thinks he must be in so much pain even as he grabs her wrist. He offers a tired smile. Hey, it's okay. It's okay Hiroko. He murmurs. His voice is hoarse. He coughs again and his chest spasms. There's a gaping hole in his chest and she's trying to heal him but nothing is working. And no, we should have gotten here faster, damn it Haseharu, she starts, her eyes burning from more than the ash in the area. She's thinking about how she had teased him and how he had just smiled and let her wrangle him into her spare Haori. The same Haori that was burned and torn, winding around his body and covered in ash and blood. Haseharu shakes his head at her. His skin feels warm but not in a good way. He has so much ambient heat around him and Hiroko is trying. It's okay. It's okay Hiroko. Don't cry. He murmurs and coughs, blood bubbling over his lips and his cracked skin. His eyes shine with tears of pain and sadness. She's trying to heal him, trying to fix the large hole in his chest but she's only succeeded in dragging out the inevitable as his eyes flicker with what little light he has left. It's okay. He speaks again. His words trail off and Hiroko funnels more chakra. She can save him. She's done it before. His hand falls from her wrist. Masakika calls out to his friend beside her. Her world is swimming and she realizes that her tears are numerous enough to block out her vision. The heat in the area is dissipating and water covers her legs and washes over Haseharu's chest. She feels sick. The world is a haze of sounds, everything muffled. Belatedly Hiroko realizes that her throat and chest hurt. She feels arms against her, encompassing her. She sees Masakika shaking Haseharu but it blurs as tears rush over her eyes. Someone is screaming. Her throat hurts. It burns. Burns like Haseharu burned. Burns like the tears slipping down her cheeks. She's tugged away. She wants to continue screaming but she can't. Hands are forced against her cheeks. Minato's face comes into focus. He's wearing a pained and torn expression. Hiroko, Hiroko. He shouts, gripping her tightly. You have to focus, come on, Hattori needs you. He says sharply. He's shaking she realizes. Hiroko's never seen Minato like this. A cry tears from her throat but she focuses on his words. His muffled words grow clearer as she sees the person laying behind him. She nods even as her world swims. She can hear Masakika behind her. Her hands are shaking. She forces the green light to well up again. She forces it and pushes her hands over Hattori's chest even as she feels the scream building in her throat again. She holds it back. Minato is murmuring in her ear, grounding her as his hands overlay hers. She failed. She failed to heal Haisehara. She couldn't save him. But she can save Hattori. She doubles down and uses her knowledge. She won't let him die. They won't both die. She forces her chakra through Hattori and grits her teeth as she heals whatever she can. The blood in his lungs, the cuts in his throat, and the damage to his chest. Every injury she can reach even as her vision blurs from more than tears. She can't let him die. Not after she failed. Not this time. She hardly registers Minato teleporting them away. She focuses everything on Hattori. Minato bows his head in his hands. His eyes are unfocused as he looks at the ground. He hears shuffling and looks up. His dull eyes hardly catch the aggrieved face of Makomo before the girl barrels into him. He catches her but he can hardly focus on her worried words. She's wondering about him, about Hiroko, about Masakika and Hattori. He feels like he failed. He did fail. He wasn't able to get there in time. The ability to teleport, and yet he still wasn't fast enough to save another kid. Minato almost wasn't fast enough to save Hattori either. If Hiroko hadn't been there, well, there was a good chance that Masakika would be the new Wind Hashira. Makomo pulls away from him as a door opens to the side. He glances over and stills. It's a Kikuchi. Past her, he can see others working tirelessly and Hiroko bowed over the bedside. Her chakra feels lower than he's ever felt it. Makomo lets out a frantic noise and darts past the other Kikuchi into the room. She's gone from Minato's vision when the door closes. He can still feel her chakra rubbing against him, lapping at his senses like waves. He'll make it, the Kikuchi tells him. Bitterness and hope waft from Minato and he nods numbly. He is glad, but even his happiness that Hattori is alive doesn't quite cover the ache in his chest. He can still hear Hiroko's scream, and can still see the gaping hole in Haisehara's chest. He bows his head and tears slip through his eyes. He'd scream, but it gets choked in his throat and all he can do is shake, sitting in front of the room with one of his friends struggling to stay alive. Kagaya finds him. He takes him aside to a set of graves, one newly dug. Minato's eyes are red as he stares at the name marking the stone. He doesn't know what to feel. Neither Hiroko nor Makomo are there. They haven't left Hattori's room, taking turns healing the man as much as they can to ensure he pulls through. Masakika is there. He's trailing his fingers over the name and setting down flowers. Minato swallows bile. He grits his teeth. Kagaya casts him a tired and sad look. I'm sorry, but someone has to cover for Hattori. I don't want to ask this of you, Minato. He murmurs. Minato shakes his head. He takes a deep breath, then another and another. Hattori told him that Hashira had duties. He learned about them and now he had his own. His Suguko is occupied elsewhere. The Wind Hashira is out of commission and one of their strongest wind breathers is dead. He takes another deep breath. I'll go with you, Masakika murmurs. Minato nods and extends his hand. Kagaya gives him a look but Minato is already flickering away. The world doesn't wait for them. It moves on. Drabble a litter of kittens. If Yugito had been told that she would end up raising a bunch of little humans a year ago she would have gutted the person who told her where they stood. She was a kunoichi, not a babysitter. Even so, she couldn't help but smile at the little heads of hair currently curled against her sides. White hair and black, mixed in dual tones across a myriad of heads. 6 kids with small, cute faces. All of them boys, and all of them held a special place in her heart. She had been teaching them how to throw kunai all afternoon and how to access their chakra. They were getting stronger now, strong enough to protect themselves from the cruel world. "Are you stuck?" A teasing voice calls, and Yugito looks up to see the form of her closest friend and the most troublesome of the kids. Tengen watches her fondly. 3 heads of hair poke out from behind him, and Yugito hears a small squeal as Suma darts from behind the man to lean over the pile of small children. They are so cute. She cheers, and Yugito holds a hand to her face. "Shish, they are sleeping, Suma." Yugito gently scolds. The kunoichi flushes darkly and nods at the older girl. She sits down next to the pile and silently squeals while holding her face in her hands. They are all tuckered out, Tengen murmurs and comes to sit next to Yugito as well. Hinatsuru and Makio follow, taking up residence in front of the girl. Yugito hums and cards a hand through the youngest's hair. It feels like so long ago that she killed their father and took them in. She's become something of a mother figure to the younger kids and something else entirely to Tengen and his 3 promised wives. I'm not surprised. They have taken to chakra well enough. Not as much as you or the girls, but they show promise. I'm going to teach them how to use the henge technique next, I think, she says, and calmly lets out a rumbling sound. Deep within her, Biju purrs alongside her. The Nibi has been oddly vocal over the months and seems proud that Yugito has taken in the kids. Almost like the Nibi expected nothing less of her container. A hand brushes her cheek. Yugito glances up at Tengen to see him looking at her with a soft expression. I'm worried about the demons. They seem to be getting more worked up. I'm thinking about approaching a demon slayer, Tengen tells her. He's only 13, almost 14, but his highest priority has always been his family and their safety. Yugito hums. That may be for the best. She had originally spent her free time looking for her home, but once it became clear that she was stuck in this strange world, she had chosen to instead train the Uzui family and get them strong enough to defend themselves. Her eyes shade over. She leans down and plants a kiss on each of the 6 heads. Kosuke nestled next to Akito. They were only 2 years younger than Tengen. Kosuke's black hair faded to white, the soft curly locks gently brushed aside so Yugito could reach his forehead. Akito had pure black hair cropped short against his head. Hiroto, the next in line. His hair was just as crazy as his older brother, and he sported a gorgeous set of golden eyes. He was also the sharpest of the brothers. Kito, the middle child and the one always trying to help her out. He had taken to medical ninjutsu well enough that the others couldn't quite grasp it. His hair was a dark brown from his mother. Kazuki and Kantaro were the youngest and a pair of twins. One sported the darkest hair that Yugito had seen while the other had the opposite. They both shared their mother's green eyes and had a penchant for causing problems. They also had all of Tengen's betrothed wrapped around their little fingers. I'll seek out the leader then, Tengen murmurs and kisses her forehead before he rises. He sends her a grin and walks out of the room. Yugito shakes her head fondly. She really has found a home here. Drabble bow, red? Inosuke, put that down this instant. Yagura feels anger well and tries to shove it down as he quickly snatches the gross heap of skin from Inosuke's little head. The boy tilts his head at him. He reaches for the rotting husk of a boar's head, eyes settled on the eyes still rolling around in the socket. Part of Yagura feels disgusted. Part of him knows he's handled far worse as a shinobi. Oh my. The call drags the two away from their staring competition and up to the giggling figure of Kotoha as she smiles at them. Yagura's face flushes out of more than embarrassment when he sees she's wearing the new kimono he grabbed on a whim. It's a pale pink color, matching his eyes and giving her feminine appearance a good boost. Yagura's face flushes over how cute she looks and he shakes off the thought with a huff. Inosuke scrambles over to his mother, grinning ear to ear. He looks so much like her and parts of Yagura wonder just how pretty the boy will be when he grows up. He's an absolute terror though. He's only 5 years old but he's constantly surprising Yagura with how much trouble he can get into. Between the boy's impromptu trips into the woods to find his mother acorns to the apparent friend he had made in a boar, Yagura isn't sure what to think. He sighs and drops the boar's head. He grimaces at the smell and kicks it into the underbrush. He doesn't want to think about how strange Inosuke is. The kid is like a damn fairy tale princess. Well, more like an Uzumaki fairy tale princess. Animals flock to him, seeking him out for some reason or the other, and he befriends them. He then proceeds to go on adventures with them that often result in either terrified villagers or a whole lot of property damage. They've been on the move ever since Yagura met the family, but sometimes they have to leave an area earlier than normal because Inosuke gets carried away. In the last town, they were in, the boy rode his boar friend into the market and caused a panic. "Ka-san, you look pretty." Inosuke chatters and hangs off his mother's arm. She smiles down at him and leans down to nod at the boy. Kotoha can never find ill will with her son. Yagura's the one who always scolds the boy over his strange actions. A fond smile shifts over his features as Inosuke proudly proclaims his latest find of acorns to his mother. She giggles and nods, telling him to show her. He proudly puffs his chest and grabs his hand to lead him away. Yagura tries to hide the fondness in his chest but he can't. He can't hide how much he cares about either of these two. He sighs and follows them both. His smile remains up until Inosuke fishes the bored head from the bushes and makes a run for it. "Damn it, Inosuke, put that down." Yagura shouts and bolts after the boy. Kotoha chuckles, raising a hand to her mouth to hide the laughter as Yagura chases Inosuke up a tree. Unfortunately, this part is over. I hope you enjoyed it. My apologies for all those quotes. Please have a good morning, afternoon, evening or night. See you next time, faves.